If they thought that Feeney knew something he shouldn't know, it would be possible to silence him. The average young wizard Feeney really doesn't take it seriously, but who are these two people? They are not only adult wizards, one is Voldemort's right-hand man. He has been studying black magic since he was in school and invented the Shadowless Blade. Such a genius requires special counter-curse magic. The other one's identity is a mystery and makes Snape so nervous. And listening to the previous conversation, Jonathan was invited back by Dumbledore, not recruited, so this may be someone on the same level as Dumbledore. The existence of levels. If these two people plan to silence Feeney, then Feeney will have no choice but to die. But fortunately, everything went smoothly and no accidents occurred. So, now we need to think about the meaning of Ravenclaw's words. Extraordinary wisdom is the greatest wealth of mankind. This sentence appears in many places, on the bronze eagle knocker at Ravenclaw's door, the base of Ravenclaw's sculpture, her lost diadem, and even on the title pages of some of Ravenclaw's private books. During this time, in order to find out everything about Ravenclaw, Feeney also went to the restricted area of the library in the middle of the night, where there were many Ravenclaw books. In fact, the restricted area of Hogwarts is not all dark magic books, there are also many ordinary books. To put it simply, books on legilimency and occlumency are in the restricted area, but the professors are willing to hand them over to you if needed. However, some books that record common black magic are no longer in the restricted area. The prescriptions for compound potions are in the restricted area, and the prescriptions for elixirs are in the general area. It can be said that in addition to books such as Advanced Black Magic that are really not allowed to be read in the restricted book area, there are also some books that the previous principals did not like. Therefore, Feeney did not actually find anything useful in the restricted book area. Information. The sentence I got now is actually of no use. It is not a spell, not a password, and not a reminder. Feeney even doubted whether Ravenclaw's diadem was the key to her inherited treasure. However, thinking that Tom Riddle once defrauded Helena of this diadem, but there was no rumor that he was the descendant of Ravenclaw. This assumption may be wrong. Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets required Snake's voice to enter, and the other three people had no useful clues. Feeney wanted to give up for a moment. He lay on the bed in frustration, extremely depressed. Meow. Chocolate tilted his head and looked at Feeney in confusion, wondering what happened to his shit sweeper. He jumped up from the cat climbing frame nearby and landed on the bed next to Feeney. He stretched out his pink little tongue and licked Feeney's face. Chocolate, don't make trouble, I'm annoyed. Meow. It's not that I'm annoying you, I'm annoyed. Feeney sat up helplessly from the bed, held the chocolate in his arms, and stroked it gently. At the same time, he was still muttering softly. Chocolate, what's the point of saying that human wisdom is the greatest wealth of mankind? Meow. Chocolate screamed in confusion. Feeney couldn't help but smile bitterly. Me too, I asked you what to do and you didn't understand. The subject of this sentence must be extraordinary wisdom rather than the greatest wealth. After all, Ravenclaw is a witch famous for her intelligence. Extraordinary wisdom, extraordinary wisdom. Feeney kept mumbling, and suddenly a light bulb went off in his head. He thought of one thing. Ravenclaw is the only college in Hogwarts that does not have a password and allows people from other colleges to enter the common room. As long as they can answer the bronze door knocker correctly, they can enter. Isn't this extraordinary wisdom? The door knocker is to screen those who do not have extraordinary wisdom. Thinking like this, Feeney gradually fell asleep, and the action of stroking the cat in his hand also stopped. Chocolate looked up at Feeney who was already asleep, sighed very humanely, jumped out of his arms, came to the foot of the bed, picked up a quilt with his mouth, pulled it onto Feeney's body, and then returned to his own mat and closed his eyes quietly. If Chocolate could speak, who knows how he would complain about this little wizard who fell asleep as soon as he said he would. The next morning, the sun shone into this luxurious bedroom through the window of the room of requirement. The sunlight shines on the quilt, turning the sky blue quilt into golden yellow. The sunlight is very warm, just like a mother's hand caressing Feeney's face, waking him up from a deep sleep. Today is Tuesday, and there is only one afternoon transfiguration class, which is just right for Feeney to find out whether the answer he thought of last night is correct. He did not go to the restaurant for breakfast but went directly to Ravenclaw's tower. He came there yesterday evening and again this morning. As a student of the Snake Courtyard, Feeney's behavior at this time was very abnormal in the eyes of these young wizards of the Eagle Courtyard. However, they didn't care. As mentioned before, as long as they could answer the question about the bronze door knocker, they would be fine. Access to the Ravenclaw common room, as it has been for thousands of years. So they didn't care about Feeney's purpose at all. After all, they were allowed to enter the lounge. Is there anything else that they should pay attention to? Of course, the premise of not caring is that they are sure that their dormitory cannot be entered by people from other colleges. In fact, this is also true. Ravenclaw can be said to be the only college besides Slytherin that has set up protective magic for the dormitories. Even the wizards of their own college cannot enter other people's dormitories without permission. Bedroom. Arriving at the eagle-shaped bronze door knocker of Ravenclaw Tower, Feeney stopped. Just as he speculated last night, Feeney thought that opening the Ravenclaw treasure inheritance might require continuously answering the knocker questions correctly, so he came. He stretched out his hand and knocked on the wooden door. The eagle's beak on the door knocker opened and said in a voice like music. What can fill a room or a heart, something that can be owned but not shared? Feeney smiled slightly. It seemed that he was lucky. This question was not difficult, so he smiled and said. It is loneliness. It can fill a room or a heart. However, loneliness only belongs to one person. There is no way to share it. If you share it, you will not be lonely. That makes sense. The sweet voice answered. As soon as the voice fell, the door to the Ravenclaw common room opened. However, Finney's purpose was not to enter the Ravenclaw common room, so he reached out and closed the door, and knocked on the wooden door again. The eagle's beak opened again, making the same sweet, gentle, musical sound. What question can you never answer? Feeney reached out and touched his chin and said. Are you dead? The door knocker didn't respond immediately. He seemed to be stunned by Feeney's answer, and then made a sound. That makes sense. The door was opened again, and Feeney did the same thing as before. What animal starts out walking on 4 legs, then walks on 2 legs, and finally walks on 3 legs? People. This is a very famous riddle of the Sphinx. Feeney did not expect Ravenclaw's eagle ring to be so knowledgeable. Continue. Feeney cheered himself up and knocked on the door knocker again. Where are the dead? In memory. That makes sense. More and more questions appeared, and it became a little difficult for Feeney to answer the questions from the easy at the beginning, and the speed of answering the questions became longer and longer, as if the eagle ring would strengthen based on the number of correct questions answered. The difficulty of the questions is the same. Feeney's eyes became brighter when he discovered this, because the change in the eagle ring was telling Feeney that his previous guess was correct. Feeney, who was sure of this, became even more crazy when answering the questions, and his crazy behavior made the little wizards in the Eagle Court feel strange. They could obviously enter the Ravenclaw common room, but the result was unexpected. To enter, you have to answer the questions. What? Are you addicted to answering questions? Even the young wizards of Ravenclaw are not very willing to answer the questions of the Eagle Ring, because some of its questions are really difficult to answer. Which one comes first, the phoenix or the fire? Where do the dead things go? It feels easy if you know the answer, but it's really uncomfortable to encounter such a question when you don't know the answer. Therefore, even in the eyes of the people at Eagle Yard, Feeney's actions looked like a lunatic. Slowly, Feeney answered many questions from morning to noon, and helped many young wizards in the Eagle Court return to the lounge. Normally, there would be many little wizards standing at the door of the Inuan common room who couldn't answer the questions and couldn't get in. However, none of them were like this today, because they were all put in by Feeney. Later, Feeney also realized that something was wrong, because the questions he answered began to repeat themselves, but there were still no clues about treasures, secret rooms, or inheritance. This surprised him and made him a little confused. Finally, Feeney's crazy behavior attracted the headmaster of Ravenclaw, Phileas Flitwick. After Professor Flitwick arrived, he stood aside and watched Feeney's crazy behavior without stopping him, waiting for Feeney to give up on his own. Finally, after Feeney answered 2 rounds of questions, he finally gave up. Because the question had been repeated for the 3rd time, there was no need to continue answering. There were no clues about the inherited treasure. It seemed that his guess is wrong. Give up. At this time, Professor Flitwick spoke. Only then did Feeney realize that the professor had been observing him for a long time, and Feeney had just seemed to be trapped in some kind of demonic barrier. All he could think about in his eyes and mind was answer questions, answer questions, answer questions. He didn't notice the professor's arrival at all. Professor. Feeney greeted Flitwick. Flitwick waved his hand and said nonchalantly. You are perfect for Ravenclaw, but it's a pity that you were sorted into Slytherin. Feeney smiled sheepishly and said. I'm just a little curious. Is there a question bank for the Eagle Ring at the entrance of the Ravenclaw common room? Or are there infinite questions? Now I'm sure that there must be only more than 200 questions, and then it will start to cycle. Flitwick smiled and said. It doesn't matter. We won't exclude any smart people. You know, extraordinary wisdom is the greatest wealth of mankind. Finney frowned when he heard this again and asked. Professor, what does this sentence mean? Flitwick looked at Finney with some surprise, and his eyes also revealed a meaning of, I see, so it's so. So, the reason you answered the eagle ring is because of this sentence, right? Finney was stunned. There was no loophole in his answer and question. How did Professor Flitwick guess it? As if he saw Finney's doubts, Professor Flitwick smiled and said. This sentence is a key in our common room that can open Ms. Ravenclaw's private library. Some people also say that it is Ms. Ravenclaw's inherited treasure. I think you came to answer the question because you think this sentence has something to do with the inherited treasure. After hearing Professor Flitwick's words, Finney scratched his head in embarrassment and said. I thought the inheritance of the treasure was a secret. Flitwick smiled and said. The four founders left their corresponding heritage treasures, Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets, Ravenclaw's library, Hufflepuff's kitchen and Gryffindor's Sword of Courage. Hogwarts was founded like this. Over time, there have been too many students. How could no one think of inheriting the treasure? Over time, this has become an open secret. Since you are interested and have answered so many questions, come with me. Bar. After speaking, Flitwick smiled and knocked on the door of the common room. What is death? It's the end of everything and the beginning of everything. That makes sense. After the door opened, Flitwick took Finney into the lounge of the Eagle Courtyard. This is the first time he has entered the lounge of another college. Just when he stepped into this lounge, a beeping sound came from the system in his mind. Enter the Ravenclaw common room and unlock the hidden achievements. The current progress of exploring Hogwarts is 35%. You will receive rewards after reaching 100%. Fiery mastery, including counterspells. Looking at the system prompts that suddenly appeared in front of him, Finney was stunned. This task may be difficult or not difficult, but the reward is too generous. That is Li Hua, a very powerful black magic. This magic can summon an increasingly powerful flame, and these flames can also mimic the form of some monsters under the control of the wizard, chasing down all flammable objects regardless of friend or foe. Moreover, Li Hua also has the power of a curse, and other spells except special counter curses cannot undo it. Of course, the ending spell is an upgraded version of the spell Stop. As a spell that forces the surrounding magic elements to stop magic, it can end this spell. However, the spell All Curses End is a very powerful one and requires extremely high magical energy to be used. You must know that when Jolijuo fought against Grindelwald, many wizards were able to use this spell together. Therefore, before learning the counterspell, few people dared to use the spell Fire Fire, and its counterspell has been slowly forgotten by most people because it is too difficult to master. Finney can obtain Fire Fire as long as he completes this task. The curse and its counterspell can be used without worrying about one's own safety, which is enough to show how generous this reward is. Thinking of this, Finney checked the achievement again. Explore Hogwarts, tour all places in Hogwarts, except, including common classrooms, corridors, stairs, etc., completed, common rooms of the four major houses, Slytherin, Ravenclaw completed, Professor's office, unfinished, kitchen, room of requirement, secret passage, room of requirement completed, the inherited treasures of the four founders, unfinished. Seeing that this achievement had specific content, Finney breathed a sigh of relief, so that he could complete this achievement in a targeted manner. In reality, he followed Professor Flitwick's footsteps and came to the sculpture of the Ravenclaw lady directly opposite the door of the Ravenclaw common room. I saw Professor Flitwick draw his wand towards the sculpture. Trace revealed. It's a revealing spell, and it's a revealing spell that requires a very high level of magic to use. Actually, there is no need to use this advanced spell at all, just a general manifestation spell, such as the prototype of the instant appearance. Flitwick explained. At this time, Finney noticed that a black hole appeared on the base below the sculpture, with a handle inside. Is that portkey? Finney asked with some uncertainty. Flitwick smiled and nodded, and said with admiration. You are really smart, but it's a pity that you are not a student of Ravenclaw. Ms. Ravenclaw's private library is restricted and does not allow apparition. It can only be entered through the door key. Okay, hold this handle. You can go in. As he spoke, he held the handle first. Seeing this, Finney quickly grabbed the handle. Just like it was completely different when Creature took him to apparate, being moved by a portkey was even more unbearable. It felt like an iron hook had hooked my navel, and then I was thrown into a rotating laundry bucket. I was nauseated, dizzy, and extremely uncomfortable. Okay, when you 6th graders can learn to apparate, you will get used to this feeling. Feeney retched twice, waved to Professor Flitwick and said, "Professor, I think I may not be able to accept this feeling for a long time." Professor Flitwick shook his head and said nothing. Feeney then began to observe the private library. The library was completely different from what he had imagined. It was a circular room, about the same size as the Ravenclaw common room. It was not very spacious. The semi-curved dome was made of a kind of glass, formed, with stars twinkling above. The starry sky above is the same as the real one, and will change accordingly. Although I don't know how Ms. Ravenclaw does it, it must be a very advanced magic. Professor Flitwick said with emotion. Feeney nodded. He didn't know what to say. Although his library in Grimmauld Place was much larger than here and had a richer collection of books, it was far behind this dome. There are not many books in this library. There is only an arc-shaped bookshelf close to the wall. On it are some books, large and small, placed in categories according to thickness. The bookshelves are completely connected, and there is no candlelight in the library, but it is still as bright as day. Feeney walked over and took a closer look. Although there were not many books here, they were all books that recorded a lot of profound magical knowledge. There were even more books that could no longer be found in the magic world today. There were also many Raven books. Ms. Crow's private records. Professor. Feeney turned back to look at Flitwick and said, "Can I borrow some of the books here to read? After all, this is the library of Ravenclaw Academy." It would be fine if Feeney discovered it by himself, but now that Flitwick had brought him here, he naturally had to ask. Flitwick smiled and said, "Of course, as long as the books are not destroyed, we still like smart people. There is not only Ms. Ravenclaw's collection of books here. Have you seen the later cabinet? In it are the graduates of Ravenclaw Academy over the years. Some research information." Only then did Feeney notice that in a corner of the library there was a cabinet that was completely different from the style of the room. If we make some discoveries, we will sort them out and put them here. After all, knowledge is meant to be disseminated. Remember that extraordinary wisdom is the greatest wealth of mankind. Well, you can read here, I go first. After speaking, Flitwick ignored Feeney's situation, grabbed a door handle on the wall behind them when they came, and disappeared. It could be seen that it was also a door key. Watching Professor Flitwick leave, Feeney shrugged and checked the achievement that had previously popped up in the system. As a result, he did not complete Ravenclaw's heritage treasure when he entered the private library. So this isn't the place I need to look for. This conclusion made Feeney a little depressed, but he shouldn't be sad. After all, there are so many books here, and there may be clues and information he needs. Although he said this, Feeney is still a little depressed. Recently, for this task, he has stopped answering questions in class. The bonus points for the Academy Cup have also been reduced a lot. He can only open 2 Academy treasure chests because there are too few. So he has not opened it. After all, compared to the Inheritance Treasure mission of the 4 founders of the Academy Treasure Box and the achievement mission of exploring Hogwarts, the rewards are richer. After all, the rewards from the Academy Treasure Chest are random, while the rewards from the missions are certain. Not to mention how tempting the lihua of the achievement mission is, but also the reward from the Inheritance Treasure mission. Formulating magic or skill talents +1 can completely make Feeney. If your talent in a certain magic field becomes better, such as black magic talent, then Feeney can better release black magic, and can even more easily reach the level of wandless and silent spell casting, such as transfiguration, or as for divination, you must know that divination requires a lot of talent. Alternatively, Feeney can also add some disguise magus, snake tune and other things that require talent and blood. This is no better than the uncertain reward of opening a treasure chest. After deciding that he would continue to search for the inherited treasure, Feeney began to search in this private library. Compared to running around without a clue in the castle, Feeney believed that Ravenclaw would leave his inheritance clues in a more private place like the private library. Of course, if Ravenclaw really didn't leave any clues, it can only be said that she didn't really want others to accept her inheritance. Time gradually passed, and now it was mid-October, and a notice was posted on the notice board in the common room. It was a notice to go to Hogsmeade. As long as you are in 3rd grade or above, and with the signature and permission of your parents or guardians, you can go to Hogsmeade to visit the largest wizard gathering place in the UK. Of course, this is not the only major event in October. There is also Halloween at the end of October. As Halloween approaches, Feeney becomes a little nervous. In fact, it's no wonder he was nervous. He remembered clearly that in the original novel, some messy things happened every Halloween. In Harry's first year, a troll broke into the castle. In his second year, Filch's cat was petrified. In his third year, Finney's eldest brother Sirius tried to break into the Gryffindor common room. In his 4th year. It can be said that Halloween is a symbol of trouble at Hogwarts. At this time, Finney is focused on searching for Ravenclaw's inherited treasure and has no time to participate in these troubles. As Halloween approaches, Hagrid's pumpkins are about to mature. Because of Halloween, Hagrid casts a swelling spell on those pumpkins. Although he hates Halloween, Finney can't postpone its arrival. Soon it was time for the Halloween dinner, and as usual, Finney sat alone on the Slytherin table, without any fellow wizards around him. This scene was also noticed by many professors. Some of them sighed silently, some didn't care, and some were sad. Finney is very talented, and he obviously does not lack any ambition after being assigned to Slytherin. The assets of the Black family can also provide him with the tools and help to implement his ambitions. In addition to being isolated and rejected, Dumbledore and the others were worried that he would become the second Voldemort. No, it should be said that he would become a far more terrifying existence than Voldemort. After all, Voldemort was not ostracized when he was in school, and he did not have so many assets and Finney's magical talent that exploded at the full moon. Snape naturally saw Finney's situation. He turned to look at Dumbledore, with a trace of doubt in his eyes, as if he was asking why Dumbledore hadn't solved Finney's matter yet. You know, if this continues, will likely lead to a change of direction in Finney's thinking about the Dark Wizard. Dumbledore shook his head slightly and said nothing. However, looking at his eyes and expression, it was obvious that he was also a little worried about Finney. Finney finished eating quickly, but instead of leaving immediately to look for information and clues as usual, he sat there and observed the changes in the hall. After all, today is the Halloween dinner. Finney was a little hungry before, so he ate immediately when he came here. He didn't have time to observe and appreciate today's dinner. The auditorium was filled with Halloween decorations. The 12 huge pumpkins planted by Hagrid were carved into lanterns in the shape of a pumpkin cart. Of course, it was indeed a pumpkin cart, and 3 or 4 students could fit inside it. A large group of bats flew around in the sky. Of course, this sky refers to the ceiling that was cast to look exactly like the sky. The bats would occasionally land and hover over the dining table, making the pumpkin-shaped candles on the table flicker constantly. During the dinner, Dumbledore invited Celestina Warbeck, a famous singing artist in the magic world, to sing the Puddlemere United's team song, which she recorded as an album, Children, Hit Back the Bludgers and Throw Out the Quaffles. Of course, this song is not actually very good. Although the voice of this witch singer is very contagious, he still can't accept this style of music. Perhaps it's because he has never been exposed to the music of the magic world since he was a child. He has been listening to music from Muggles all these years. After all, he was an ordinary person in his previous life. He is still more accustomed to the aesthetics of Muggle society. The music gradually reached its climax, and the young wizards at the banquet stood up and cheered excitedly, swaying to the music of the witch singer. Only the Muggle-born wizards and Finney were still sitting on their chairs, staring at this magical scene in a daze. Well, it was actually a bit embarrassing. Fortunately, the song was not very long and ended quickly. Amidst the enthusiastic applause of the wizards, the team of witch singers temporarily left to rest. It is said that they will come back to sing a few songs later. Finney couldn't help but have doubts about this. To be honest, the music of the witch singers was not unpleasant, and it would not be said to be unpleasant. However, Finney still couldn't appreciate it. However, Celestina Warbeck is still very famous in the wizarding world. Her songs have been played many times on the Wizarding Radio Magic Hour program. She was also a student at Hogwarts and is said to be a Gryffindor. A member of. After graduation, she began to walk in the magical world as a singer, and eventually became famous. After she became famous as a singer, on the last night of her Aphrodite tour, 3 loyal fans collided with 3 broomsticks in the sky above Liverpool. Moreover, her concert tickets were sold at sky-high prices on the black market, making it impossible for many wizards to attend her concerts. Even Finney would choose not to go when she saw the price of the tickets. Of course, it was not because she could not afford them. But because in Finney's opinion, Celestina Warbeck's concert was not worth the price. Of course, this is not the most famous thing about Celestina Warbeck's team. According to legend, there is a female ghost in their team. Although in the eyes of many Muggles, ghosts and ghosts are the same thing, they are actually different. Ghosts are spiritual magical creatures. Of course, in the earliest times, wizards believed that ghosts were also members of human beings. However, ghosts opposed this view. They believed that this carried a prejudice that they were already gone in the past. So the Ministry of Magic had to set up a separate branch for them and set up corresponding offices. This event is recorded in detail in Newt's Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Female ghosts are dark creatures that have nothing to do with humans. Of course, their body shape and posture are very similar to humans. In Muggle society, female ghosts have another name, banshees. Their black hair is long and drags to the ground, their faces look like skeletons, their eyes are glowing green. This kind of creature usually lives in Ireland or Scotland. It looks like a woman, but their screams are as deadly to humans as mandrakes. However, according to legend, the screams of female ghosts are better. However, in Feeney's view, deadly sounds are useless even if they sound good, because no one will take the initiative to listen. Therefore, Feeney believes that the rumor about the female ghost of Setna Warbeck's team is false. At this time, the dinner party has passed, the food on the table has disappeared from the plates, and various desserts, tea, fruit juices have also appeared on the table. Feeney casually took a glass of lemon juice and just took a sip when he heard a little wizard exclaiming, "Hurry to the stands." When Feeney heard this, he glanced out of the corner of his eye and was stunned. He quickly turned his head and looked over. It was this glance that made his expression freeze. The juice that had not been swallowed in his mouth also spurted out. Fortunately, there was no one else around him, otherwise that person would be out of luck. As for why Feeney was so surprised, it was because he saw something on the stage, something that was almost the same as what he remembered. With a head of black hair trailing to the ground, a face like a skeleton, and glowing green eyes, she is a female ghost. There were two reasons that surprised Feeney. He didn't expect that anyone would actually listen to the female ghost singing. You know, this can be said to be risking their lives to listen to the song. The other reason is that Dumbledore actually allowed her to enter Hogwarts. You must know that female ghosts are too dangerous to young wizards. Not only are they potentially fatal, but their appearance can also scare them. Wretched on many children. The female ghost opened her mouth wide, and a strange sound echoed through the auditorium. At the same time as this strange voice sounded, a burst of musical accompaniment also sounded, and then came the voice of Celestina Warbeck, who was singing selflessly with a golden microphone. Brown skin, black hair, a slightly chubby figure, and her selfless singing made the stage look a little wild. The female ghost's voice is actually not very pleasant, and is very different from what was rumored. However, this unpleasant scream is integrated into the soundtrack, without any sense of dissonance. After the song ended, Finney had to admit that Celestina Warbeck was popular in the wizarding world for a reason. This attitude of being willing to work with a female ghost was not something that ordinary people could tolerate. Who wouldn't be popular if she was not popular? Fire. Fortunately, there are no celebrities in the magic world who cry when their fingers are cut. Otherwise, Celestina Warbeck's behavior at this time is the biggest threat to them. Of course, the wizards in the magic world will not, because if your finger is cut, you will die or live. Finally, there is one of Celestine Warbeck's most famous songs, which is one of the causes of the Three Broomsticks incident, "You stole my pot, but you can't have my heart." Even Feeney, who doesn't like the music style of the wizarding world, needs to admit that this is a good song. You thought you were a good wizard and conquered me with your spell. But guess what, Mr. Wizard, you don't really know me. You think you're smart, but you're actually a liar. You have no choice but to take everything you have and fly away. You stole my pot. My favorite black hat. Steal my owl. And then run away like a vampire bat. Not my heart. No, 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 you stole her pot. You stole my pot, but you can't get my heart. Her heart. The dinner ended with this song that Finney admitted was a good song, but he just couldn't appreciate it. After Celestina Warbeck's team left Hogwarts, the young wizards returned to their respective common rooms with the crowd. Finney believed that many young wizards would have trouble sleeping tonight. After all, Celestina Warbeck was a famous musician, singer, and idol to them. Besides, because of the female ghost, I think many people would have nightmares because of it. Although the Halloween dinner was lively and buffered Finney's nervous brain, it still didn't make him have other ideas about Ravenclaw's inherited treasure. The inherited treasure of the four founders was only found by Finney of Slytherin, but he couldn't get in yet. Ravenclaw now had some clues. Although it hadn't been found yet, he really had no clues about Gryffindor and Hufflepuff. No matter how the Halloween dinner goes, the little wizards still have to go to class as normal the next day. In November, the weather starts to get colder, and even snowflakes start to fall in the sky. One morning, Finney woke up from the room of requirement and saw the grass outside the castle, the woods were covered with snow, and even the Black Lake was beginning to freeze. Of course, the ice should not be too thick at this time. Finney has no intention of trying it. Seeing the Black Lake, Finney suddenly remembered a rumor circulating in the wizarding world. It is said that Gryffindor is still alive today. When he was old, he used animagus to turn into a squid and live in the Black Lake of Hogwarts, protecting the school he and his friends built together, waiting for the return of his best friend Slytherin. Perhaps Gryffindor's heritage treasure actually lies in the Black Lake. Feeney shook his head and suppressed this idea. Obviously, Ravenclaw hadn't even settled the matter yet, so don't think about the other founders. Even Finny, who didn't communicate with other little wizards, heard that winter came very early this year. However, Feeney didn't care, because in his previous life, where he lived, it was winter after October. However, even though there is not much difference in Feeney's opinion, he deliberately learned common household magic such as heating spells and drying spells. After all, Hogwarts is in the UK, and the UK has no heating, no fire pits, down jackets and cotton-padded clothes. There are only warm clothes made of wool and a fireplace. In previous years, when he was at number 12 Grimmauld Place, Creech would prepare everything so that Feeney wouldn't feel any cold. However, this was not the case at Hogwarts, even in November. Feeney still felt the cold, so he put on a thick wool sweater and a scarf. At the same time, the search for the Ravenclaw heritage treasure has also been temporarily stopped. He is learning the constant temperature spell and how to fix the constant temperature spell on clothes. This is no longer the category of magic, but the category of alchemy. Alchemy is an elective course at Hogwarts, and it is an elective course for any WT level students. Moreover, the alchemy taught is not comprehensive and detailed. If you want to develop in this area, you must either have a corresponding inheritance in your family, or you need to go to the Magic Academy in Cairo to study specifically. In Cairo, alchemy is a basic subject. Both Dumbledore and Nick Mellor are said to have been there. Except for Feeney, few little wizards focus on how to keep warm, because there is one thing that attracts their attention more in November. The Quidditch match at Hogwarts begins. Therefore, if the little wizards get up early in the morning, they can see Hagrid holding a huge broom against the wind and snow to clear the road to the Quidditch pitch for the little wizards to travel with. Quidditch is the biggest sport in the wizarding world, so Feeney naturally pays attention to it. A few years ago, he and Kreacher went to watch the Quidditch World Cup together. Although this sport is full of loopholes and unreasonable things in Feeney's opinion, the blood is really passionate and the excitement is really exciting. Except for the occasional situation where a game is played for several days or nights, it is still good. However, this year, Feeney is not paying attention to Quidditch because he is still researching how to make constant temperature clothes. Professor Flitwick, what do you need to do if you want to put a spell on a piece of clothing? After he couldn't research anything on his own, Feeney found Professor Flitwick of Charms. Of course, he couldn't research it because the books on alchemy in the Hogwarts library and even his private library were very less, unless he returns to the family library at 12, Grimmauld Place to look for the books that cannot be moved. When Flitwick heard Feeney's doubts, he looked at Feeney with some surprise. Mr. Black, I have to remind you that this knowledge belongs to the category of alchemy. If you are interested, you can take alchemy courses after completing the NEWT proficiency exam in 7th grade. Feeney frowned. Can't you learn now? As far as I know, their little wizards in Cairo have been learning alchemy-related knowledge since they entered school. Flitwick shook his head and said, I think, Mr. Black, you should have read their teaching materials, then you should know that they are just learning the most basic theoretical knowledge, using the material itself and some production techniques to make some items have magic power. Of course, well, the effect of anything made this way won't be very good, nor will it last too long. Feeney nodded. Yes, I have watched their courses, and I don't think what they are learning can be called alchemy. Flitwick shook his head and said, What do you think is alchemy? It's not just the creation of things like the Philosopher's Stone that is called alchemy. In fact, alchemy is not as advanced as you think. Our common broomsticks and the golden snitch are all products of alchemy, and invisibility cloaks, magic crucibles, etc., as long as they are enriched with magical energy, can be said to be alchemical products, and the act of making magic items is alchemy. Feeney was thoughtful and said to Professor Flitwick, I understand, thank you, Professor. Of course, Feeney would not give up just like that, but he now understood that the profound alchemical knowledge was in the hands of those master alchemists, and at this time, he did not have access to these things. As for keeping warm, Feeney has always had a choice, and he did so not long ago, which was to customize a Hogwarts wizard robe with multiple functions from Madame Malkin. It should even be worn in the past 2 days. The goods have arrived. He studied alchemy just because he wanted to make such a piece of clothing himself. He thought it would be very popular in Hogwarts. The Black family was rich, but Feeney still understood the principle of sitting on the fence. However, he seemed to have forgotten that his family also had shares in Gringotts, dragon farms, and many other profitable industries. He doesn't need to find a way to make money on his own. Even if he spends money every day, the family's assets will not decrease but will continue to increase. Well, by the way, there are many shops in Diagon Alley that are actually rented by the Black family. Feeney is a real rent collector and a rich man. However, the alchemy incident also gave Feeney a clue. The earliest time turner in the wizarding world of Phoenix was made by Ravenclaw. This shows that Ravenclaw is actually a powerful alchemist in addition to being a powerful wizard. If Ravenclaw is a master alchemist, then she not only has a private library, but also a private alchemy laboratory. Thinking of this, Feeney didn't waste any time and immediately came to the room of requirement. However, after arriving here, he suddenly thought that he seemed to have only tried the inheritance treasure house before, and not other rooms. I need Ravenclaw's private library. So Feeney recited these words silently in his mind and walked 3 times in front of the giant monster's tapestry. A door appeared on the wall opposite the tapestry. Feeney walked over and opened the door. Inside was the Ravenclaw's private library located in the Ravenclaw common room. So the room of requirement can directly open her library, which is right. After all, this was probably her office. Feeney looked at the system panel and saw that there was still no progress in the mission of exploring Hogwarts and finding the inherited treasure. Therefore, entering the private library from the room of requirement was not an option. Of course Feeney knew about this, but he still had some illusions in his heart. However, now the illusion was broken. Since the private library doesn't work, let's try the real purpose this time. I need the alchemy lab in Ravenclaw. The same operation as before, and sure enough, the door appeared, which meant that Feeney's guesses before opening the door were correct. Yes, Feeney was still wrong. After he opened the door and walked in, the mission still made no progress, and this was not the location of Ravenclaw's inherited treasure. Looking at the Ravenclaw's alchemy room in front of him, although it is not a secret room for inherited treasures, Feeney could not help but sigh at the luxury here. A large number of alchemy instruments are actually glass bottles and boxes used to hold various materials, but the materials are different. There were crucibles, scales, and some things that Feeney didn't recognize. They seemed to be testing something. But it's a pity that there is nothing else in it, and there is no material left by Ravenclaw. What interested Feeney the most was the box containing the finished products. It was also empty. On the contrary, there were some scrapped alchemy products in the box containing the discarded products. Feeney even saw a broken hourglass inside, which was probably what he found. Is an unsuccessful time turner. Although this is not an inherited treasure, Feeney has gained something, namely those scrapped alchemy products. Their existence has to make Feeney think that among Ravenclaw's inherited treasures, even if there are no finished products, they still exist. Production method. After picking up trash for a while, Feeney walked out of this room and returned to the 8th floor of the castle. He needs to reconsider where Ravenclaw may have placed his heritage treasures. From a starting point, consider why Ravenclaw or the 4 founders left their respective heritage treasures. First of all, the period when they established Hogwarts was one of the darkest periods for wizards. Affected by ordinary people, church members, witch hunters, fire cultists and other forces, wizards were persecuted on a large scale, and even some young wizards were persecuted because of depression. An obscurus appeared within his own magical talent, thus becoming an obscurus. The 4 founders established Hogwarts to prevent such incidents from continuing to occur. Therefore, in fact, Hogwarts is not only a school, but also a military fortress, a fortress used to resist Muggle invasion. Thinking from this aspect, the 4 founders left the inherited treasures probably to protect Hogwarts. It has been confirmed that there is a basilisk in Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets. It is likely that Slytherin left it to protect the castle. The presence. Then, the other 3 people should have left means to protect the castle in their respective secret rooms. Ravenclaw is obviously an alchemist master, and the protective means an alchemist master can leave for the school will also be powerful alchemical products. At this time, Feeney thought of the statues and armors that could be seen in the school auditorium, entrance, hall, and even corridors. Those things all had a touch of magic. If you didn't specifically think about it from an alchemical perspective, you would never have thought that they could be alchemical products. Then, we need to think about whether there is a method to control these alchemical products in Ravenclaw's Chamber of Secrets. Perhaps, the way to open the Chamber of Secrets has something to do with alchemy. Feeney could only think of 2 possibilities for a place that could control the authority of all alchemical products in the entire castle. One was the principal's office, and the other was a place he had never realized before. Ravenclaw's own office. There have always been rumors that the Room of Requirement is Ravenclaw's office, but based on the characteristics of the Room of Requirement, it would be a bit inconvenient to use it as an office. But no one had ever considered that if the Room of Requirement wasn't Ravenclaw's office, then where was her office? As soon as this idea appeared in Feeney's mind, he couldn't get rid of it, and Feeney also believed that if he could find Ravenclaw's office, it would be helpful for him to find the secret room where the inherited treasure is located. It just so happens that he still has an unfinished achievement task about exploring Hogwarts, so we can complete it together. The next day was Monday, and Feeney happened to have a defense against the dark arts class. Although Feeney had always been suspicious of Professor Jonathan, it was still okay to go to his office and ask him some questions. Before, I gave you the two magics of wand lighting and wand extinguishing, and now you have mastered them very well. Next, I will talk about the dark creatures that you are most likely to encounter in the wild, vampires and werewolves. Professor Jonathan said to everyone. After hearing his words, several young wizards below opened their mouths to refute something. Jonathan didn't care when he saw this and said with a smile. Of course, I know that werewolves and vampires should actually be the content of your third grade, so I won't tell you too much about these two creatures. What I want to say is what you need to do if you encounter them. A young wizard from Gryffindor raised his hand and asked. So, Professor, what do we do if we encounter them? Jonathan waved his hand and said. I remember I told you in the first class that I won't ask you questions, and I don't need you to ask questions in class. I will try my best to tell you what you need to know when I teach you. As for your question, if you encounter vampires and werewolves, my advice to you is not to encounter them. Whether it's a vampire or a werewolf, their power and strength are beyond what little wizards like you can handle. Although it seems that I have given you nothing, I still want to remind you that if you really encounter them, don't try to fight them, resist them, look for opportunities to escape, and escape as far away as possible. Vampires and them you don't really need to suck blood, you just crave blood. Therefore, if you meet a vampire, it will be much better than meeting a werewolf. Of course, girls should pay special attention when they meet a vampire, because most vampires prefer girls. As for why I say that meeting a vampire is better than meeting a werewolf, I need you to understand one thing here, that is, if you are bitten by a transformed werewolf, you will die, even if you are not saved because of timely treatment. If you die, the rest of your life will be worse than death. The main thing about a transformed werewolf is that the person who is bitten will transform into a werewolf. This is irreversible. Moreover, werewolves cannot control themselves during the full moon. They may even hurt their family members. Therefore, almost all wizards will reject werewolves, making it difficult for them to find decent jobs, so most werewolves will go astray. Even if I encounter a werewolf outside, even if it's not a full moon, I will immediately apparate out of there. Even if I am bitten by a werewolf who has not transformed, although I will not turn into a werewolf, I will not turn into a werewolf. Some werewolf characteristics appear, such as hair growing near the wound. Similarly, the wound is difficult to heal and needs to be treated with a mixture of silver powder and white fresh water. As for you encountering werewolves, although in my opinion, it is difficult to encounter werewolves in your current situation, but if you are really unlucky enough to encounter werewolves, you need to save yourself. This is what I want to teach you in today's lesson. What I'm giving you is how to save yourself when facing a werewolf. Jonathan glanced at the many young wizards, then stood on the podium and took out his wand. As his wand recovered, a burst of smoke emerged from the tip of the wand and condensed above his head. After that, a picture appeared in the smoke. That was a werewolf. At the same time, Professor Jonathan also said. Werewolves are almost the same as normal humans when they are not transformed. However, their faces will be paler before and after the full moon, and werewolves are generally older, and their eyes are often full of bloodshot eyes. As for when they turn into wolves, I very much hope you won't see it with your own eyes. Compared with ordinary wolves, they have slightly shorter muzzles and smaller pupils, and they look closer to humans. At the same time, the hair on the werewolf's tail will be in tufts, and they will attack humans unconsciously. Unlike wolves, werewolves will take the initiative attacking humans. Some authorities believe that the reason why werewolves attack humans unintentionally is because they lose the ability to cast spells when they transform into werewolves. However, werewolves themselves will strengthen their power. There is nowhere to release this power that will make them they lose their minds and try to unleash this power by attacking others. If you encounter a werewolf outside, you need to make different judgments and actions based on different terrains. If you are in a city or village with densely populated houses, then you must lock the door with a magic spell. As mentioned before, whether it is a muggle, a squib, or a wizard, they will lose the ability to cast spells after they transform into a werewolf, so they have no way to open the door through magic and can only destroy it. At this time, you can buy time for yourselves. If you are in the wilderness or plains, and there is no place to hide around, then I think you need to pray to Merlin, because in such a terrain, unless a particularly powerful wizard can control the werewolf, the rest of the people will have to be the werewolf bites and even kills the ending. Having said this, Jonathan paused, clapped his hands, and focused all the little wizard's attention on himself from the scene of smoke above his head. Then why don't you record these things? Pay attention, be alert at all times, stay away from werewolves, and don't get bitten. Remember, stay away from werewolves. This is the best way to protect yourself. The defense against the dark arts course is not to tell you how to deal with black magic, but to tell you how to prevent yourself from facing black magic. Afterwards, Jonathan told the little wizard some of the rules agreed upon by wizards in ambition, namely the 3 colors of fireworks, which are released through the fireworks spell. Among them, red fireworks represent an urgent danger and the need to call for help. Yellow fireworks are generally dangerous, but you can still persist, or there is a chance of defeating them. Green means safety, finding the target, and gathering. Fireworks of any color mean gathering and warning. When you see fireworks in the wild, you need to know whether you can handle what the fireworks represent before you choose whether to help. Moreover, the fireworks these are not the only colors. You can also launch fireworks of other colors, and the meanings can be agreed upon between you. Finally, the lesson ended with the swishing sound caused by the friction of quill pens and parchment paper when the little wizards recorded these things. According to Professor Jonathan's previous teaching methods and this lesson, everyone should probably be taught how to use the fireworks spell next. After the little wizards left, Feeney followed Jonathan to his office. The defense against the dark arts professor's office is located on the 3rd floor of Hogwarts Castle. For some reason, Professor Jonathan did not decorate this office. Instead, it is an empty office. Unlike other offices, there are bookshelves and many books, or things that he likes. Professor Jonathan's office only has a table, a few chairs, and an open suitcase. Finney clearly noticed that the suitcase, like his, was cast with the traceless extension spell. There is a space of its own inside, and Professor Jonathan's luggage and books should be inside. So, Mr. Black, what do you want to talk to me about? Professor Jonathan's voice diverted Finney's attention from the box. Ah, that's it, Professor. I want to ask, can you teach us all the spells we use? For example, the unlocking spell, the locking spell, or something else. Jonathan shook his head and said, No, your level is not enough, and I always feel that you, a big little wizard, don't need to learn how to deal with dark creatures and dark magic. What you have to do is protect yourselves and not go where you may encounter them, because you will not be their match. But, okay, Mr. Black, I think you and I know very well that those practical spells can't trouble you. So, what questions do you want to ask me? Feeney was stunned and said after a moment. Okay, Professor, I want to ask, do you know the history of this office? I want to know about this ancient castle. After hearing this, Jonathan looked at Feeney deeply and said, Although I don't know what you are looking for, I can still tell you that among the offices in Hogwarts Castle today, only the principal's office, the staff lounge, and the administrator's office have always been offices. The other offices they were all built slowly later. If you want to find some historical offices, you might want to ask Dumbledore. His office has existed since the founding of the school. Feeney was stunned. He didn't expect that he just asked a professor for this important clue. If what Jonathan said was true, then Ravenclaw and even the offices of the 4 founders were hidden by them. Got up. Of course, Feeney would not take everything Jonathan said seriously. After all, the defense against the dark arts professors at Hogwarts were all problematic. Although there is no problem with Professor Jonathan's teaching, and it is even much better than the previous professors. Of course, this is what I heard from senior students in other houses. Slytherin is the house that most rejects Feeney, so naturally it will not someone was chatting in front of Feeney, and their first reaction when they saw Feeney was to leave. The best way to not believe something is to find the truth, which can also be said to be to find evidence to prove that you are right or wrong. Next is the history of magic. Professor Binns, the professor who teaches the history of magic, is obviously not suitable to ask this question. Although, maybe he will know the answer that Feeney wants. However, no one can expect a soul who has forgotten even his own death to recall the rumors and legends in Hogwarts Castle. Then, the professors that Feeney can find are very limited. First of all, those who have not handed over to him are definitely not acceptable. After all, his reputation in the magic world. The remaining professors, namely the deans of the 4 colleges. There is only one class on Tuesday, which is Transfiguration in the afternoon, taught by Professor McGonagall. As the most serious professor at Hogwarts, her classes may not be very rigid and more lively, but they must be the least free. No matter what you want to do with transfiguration, no matter how advanced your transfiguration is, please remember that Gamp's basic transfiguration law we mentioned in the last lesson is a basic transfiguration principle in the magical world. We can transform objects or create something, but please remember the 5 exceptions to Gamp's basic law of transformation. We cannot transform food. Even if we transform an object into food, its essence is not no change. We cannot conjure magic items because they themselves possess magical fluctuations, which cannot be simulated by transfiguration. We cannot conjure magical animals. Just like magic items, they themselves have their own magic fluctuations. We cannot conjure things that do not exist because they are not in our knowledge. In the end, we can't conjure a living person because that would change the world. Professor McGonagall was walking down the aisle of the classroom while briefly explaining the basics of transfiguration. Perhaps it was because Gryffindor lost to Slytherin in the Quidditch match not long ago, and she was not in a very high mood. Of course, there are actually many types of transformation spells, and what you need to do now is to practice the simplest transformation spells. As for the more advanced transformation spells, summoning spells, human body transformation spells, and animagus spells, that's not what you need to know now. In fact, of course, there are more than just these transformation techniques. Magic such as the disguise charm is essentially a part of the transformation technique. However, you still need to know something. The larger the object you transform, the more magic power is required and the shorter the duration. Vice versa, the smaller the object, the smaller the magic power and the longer the duration. After saying this, Professor McGonagall looked around and said loudly, "Now, you need to continue to connect with the task I assigned in the previous class, turning matches into needles. Remember, you need firm belief. The more detailed the details of the object in your mind, the easier it will be to transform it." Professor McGonagall waved her wand, and a large number of matches flew up from the podium behind her, and then landed in front of the little wizards. Except for Feeney, there was nothing in front of him. As for Mr. Black, judging from your performance in the last class, you are already proficient in using the transformation spell. Therefore, you can now try to learn the upgrade of the transformation spell, the transformation spell. The transformation spell is the basis of transformation. As long as you imagine the object that needs to be transformed in your mind, you can use this spell to cast transformation. However, the transformed item will not last too long, nor will it have the characteristics of that item. It is more like an illusion-shaped spell that changes the appearance, and the transformation spell must be more precise. Just like the magic that Professor McGonagall used to turn the desk into a pig in the first class, it is a transformation spell. Although the transformation spell can also do the same thing, the pig that appears in that way is not alive and will not there is corresponding wisdom, and the transformation spell can. Although the transfiguration spell cannot change the nature of the item, the transformation spell can change the form of the item. As long as the magic power is sufficient, it can even maintain that shape forever. Hearing this, Feeney nodded and opened the Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration written by Emmerich Switch, preparing to read about the transformation spell. In fact, Feeney has actually started to practice the transformation spell now, and there is no need to learn the theoretical basis anymore. However, he still needs to maintain his status as a genius in front of Professor McGonagall. Although he is also a genius himself. But in comparison, a genius who can learn various magic spells faster and can use them skillfully in a short period of time is obviously more talented, isn't it? What's more, if Feeney wants to change his situation in school, he can only rely on professors. The image of a genius is naturally much more important. Of course, if this was outside school, then he might choose force, but in school, Feeney still has self-awareness, and using force rashly is not a good choice. Outside of school, Feeney didn't have those worries. After all, the Black family, which had existed in the magical world for thousands of years and had many famous wizards, naturally had their own backup plan. What's more, it's not like Feeney has done nothing over the years. No, Mr. Black, I believe you have a complete grasp of it in theory, don't you? Professor McGonagall interrupted Feeney's movements and said at the same time. Of course, I hope you can study by yourself in this class and come to my office after class. This can be said to be a clear telling to Feeney, you can play by yourself during this class first, and when get out of class is over, I will start a small stove for you. Feeney nodded. Okay, I understand, Professor McGonagall. Professor McGonagall is not the only one who gives Feeney such treatment. It can be said that except for history of magic and astronomy, almost all professors are willing to give Feeney a little extra time after class. The class was very uneventful. After all, we were practicing the transfiguration spell, which, like the levitation spell, was the simplest spell. Well, the transfiguration spell was usually more difficult to learn than the charms class. Because little wizards are rarely able to be firm in their hearts, and the fantasies in their minds are very real. The younger the wizard, the easier it is for all kinds of fantastic ideas to appear in his mind, which has a great impact on casting transformation spells. However, just because it is simple, there won't be too many problems in the class. At least no one will hurt themselves or others while practicing the transformation spell, such as an explosion or something. If such a little wizard really exists, then Professor McGonagall may have to admit that this little wizard has a talent far beyond anyone else in blasting. After class, Feeny followed Professor McGonagall to her office. Professor McGonagall's office and the Transfiguration classroom are not on the same floor. The classroom is on the first floor of the castle, and the office is on the second floor of the castle, which is a small study next to the corridor. There was a roaring fireplace, a window looking out onto the Quidditch pitch, and a hidden door leading to a gravel-paved bedroom. Of course, it might be because this place is relatively small, or because Professor McGonagall has many courses, and she usually works in the Transfiguration classroom downstairs. Okay, don't be nervous, just sit down wherever you want. After walking into the office, Professor McGonagall said kindly to Feeny. Although Professor McGonagall looks very serious, Professor Snape is far behind in his attitude towards the little wizard. Okay, Professor. Feeny spoke and sat on a single sofa. Professor McGonagall looked at the somewhat embarrassed Feeny, smiled slightly, waved her wand, and a teacup appeared in front of Feeny. When Professor McGonagall waved her wand, the teapot in the corner of the room floated over, and was in the cup. Pour some tea into it. Drink some black tea, I don't know if you like it. Feeny took the cup and said. I like it very much, thank you, Professor. Professor McGonagall waved her hand and said no, and drank tea quietly. After a while, she spoke. So, Mr. Black, can you tell me what your current progress is in Transfiguration? Feeny was stunned. He didn't expect that Professor McGonagall would see what he was hiding. He was mentally prepared to be seen out, but being seen out so easily still made him a little discouraged. But he still told the truth. I have mastered simple transformation spells, and disembodiment spells. I am not yet proficient in summoning spells. I also have some understanding of the disappearance spell. I don't know much about human body transformation and related magic spells. Hearing Feeny's words, Professor McGonagall showed some surprise on her face. She knew about Feeny's talent. After all, 11 years ago, Feeny's genius act of bursting out magic power on the full moon was once it was spread throughout the magic world, and even the mysterious man thought of accepting Feeny as his disciple. Yes, that's right, Voldemort did not intend to take Feeny as his subordinate, but wanted to take him as a disciple. However, he gave up under the pressure of some ancient beings who were still alive in the Black family. Although they don't care about worldly affairs, this does not mean that they will allow the best genius in the history of their family to become a disciple of a certain dark wizard. Even if the entire dark wizard does have some achievements that can be said. In a panic, Professor McGonagall came back to her senses and said. Your progress is a bit beyond my expectations, but it doesn't matter. You can just learn the summoning spell normally. As he said that, he dug out a somewhat worn notebook from his bookshelf and handed it to Feeny. This is some of my experience on summoning spells, disappearing spells and restoration spells, as well as experience records. You can take it back and take a look. Also, do you plan to join my club? The Transfiguration Club. I usually invite third graders. The above young wizards who have certain talents in the art of transformation joined in, and the main content is to provide more in-depth teaching and discussion of the art of transformation. Feeny's eyes lit up. It could be said that he was joining the circle that Professor McGonagall valued. This would be very helpful for him to change his situation, so he nodded hurriedly. It's my pleasure. When Professor McGonagall heard this, a satisfied smile appeared on her face and she said. Of course, I believe Professor Flitwick will also invite you to join his Charms Club. Well, Mr. Black, do you have any questions? Feeny heard this and said hurriedly. Well, it's like this, Professor. I've been looking up the history of the castle recently. I want to ask you about the history of your office. What was it used for before? Professor McGonagall was stunned and said. Ah, this office. When I was a student, it belonged to Dumbledore. Later, I took it over from him. Before that, it was just an empty lounge. Feeny frowned and asked again to be sure. So, Professor, this was not an office before Professor Dumbledore used it? Professor McGonagall frowned and looked at Feeny, and said. Mr. Black, although I don't know what you are looking for, I need you to understand that this castle is very old, and there are some places in it that I, and even Dumbledore, are not very clear about, so please pay attention to your safety. Now, I think you need to go back to your dormitory. Finney nodded and said to Professor McGonagall. Okay, I know, Professor. After that, he turned around and was about to leave. Just as he was about to walk out of the office door, McGonagall suddenly said. Oh, by the way, Mr. Black, there will be a chance at my Transfiguration Club tomorrow night, and I think you need this. As he spoke, a piece of paper flew from Professor McGonagall's desk to Feeney's hand. Feeney opened it and took a look. There was only one location written on it. 6th floor, classroom 21. Feeney was very confused about this classroom because he remembered clearly that there was no so-called classroom 21 on the 6th floor of Hogwarts Castle. Professor McGonagall nodded and said. Yes, classroom 21, finding the professor is the first test for you to join the club. You must remember Gamp's basic law of transformation. Feeney nodded, thinking that maybe he would be able to find this classroom tomorrow. Moreover, Professor McGonagall's last words were obviously telling him an important clue, so he said. Then, Professor, I'm going back first. Professor McGonagall nodded and watched Feeney leave her office. After seeing Feeney disappear completely, she immediately got up and went to the principal's office on the 8th floor of the castle. Albus. What is that kid looking for? Today he asked me about my office. As soon as he entered the office, Professor McGonagall hurriedly spoke to Dumbledore, completely unaware of Professor Jonathan who was quietly drinking some kind of drink beside him. Don't worry, Minerva, Jonathan has already told me about the child. Dumbledore said calmly. Professor McGonagall then saw that Jonathan was also in the office, and his expression suddenly changed. Sorry, Professor Jonathan, I didn't see you just now. Then he looked at Dumbledore again. Albus. You should know that that child is very talented, but none of us can be sure what will happen if he continues to stay in Slytherin. Jonathan said in agreement. Dumbledore, Professor McGonagall and I have the same view on this matter. Little Phineas is very talented, and I can feel that the power in his body is constantly increasing. If you continue, just let him have his say. Before he finished speaking, he was interrupted by Dumbledore. Minerva, Jonathan, don't worry, I have some plans for our young Mr. Black, and I will talk to Severus about it later. However, now I think you should understand an old man's desire for sleep. Be in the mood. Professor McGonagall's face was still ugly, and she didn't know whether it was because of Dumbledore or because of Jonathan. In short, she turned and left immediately after Dumbledore said these words. Looking at Professor McGonagall leaving, Dumbledore sighed and looked at Jonathan. Jonathan, can you keep an eye on that child for me? I know you can do this. I still haven't found any trace of Tom, but I believe he is still alive in a corner of the world, waiting. What day will come back? When Jonathan heard this, he also sighed and said. Dumbledore, do you believe in your savior so much? You know, what happened that year is not a secret to many people. It was not the child who defeated your student, but his mother. I think little Phineas is more suitable as your main training target than the child you left to grow up in the Muggle world. Dumbledore looked at Jonathan with some differences. If I remember correctly, don't you intend to get involved in these things? What? Jonathan shrugged and said. Indeed, whether it is you or your student, these things are too small and too short-lived. For me, they are just things that can be over with a sleep. But this child is very talented. I said his talent is not in the field of magic, but in his heart. Having said this, Jonathan looked at Dumbledore and said. I think you should have heard my story from Nico, and you should know how important inner firmness is to us. When Dumbledore heard this, his face became ugly, even uglier than Professor McGonagall's face before. Jonathan, don't forget that when I invited you here to teach the defense against the dark arts class, you couldn't do anything to the children. Jonathan shrugged and said. I promised that I would not take the initiative to attack them, but it does not mean that I will not be moved when I see this good child who is suitable to be my offspring. Moreover, the choice he made by himself does not count as my initiative. Let's take action. Just when Jonathan said these words to Dumbledore, Feeney, who was reading a book in the Slytherin dormitory room, saw a new task that popped up in the system. Destiny's Choice, an ancient and powerful being has taken a keen interest in you and will extend an invitation to you soon. However, you are faced with this ancient and powerful invitation. A tough choice. Choice 1, accept the invitation of Jonathan E. Reed, become his descendant, mission reward, obtain the bloodline of the ancestor, magic affinity +5, black magic talent +1, bloodline magic inheritance, golden echo, Jonathan, choose 2, refuse Jonathan E. Reed's invitation, mission reward, purple echo, Jonathan, a special magic, unlock the ancestor's recognition mission. When seeing this task, Finney was completely confused, because he did nothing wrong, and he didn't even meet Professor Jonathan today. However, the content of the task gave Finney some answers that he had never been sure of. As mentioned before, as the Professor of Defense against the Dark Arts at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, how could Professor Jonathan not have any problems? Now, Finney finally knew the reason for those peacekeeping parts on him. Accepting his invitation means becoming his descendant and obtaining the blood of the original ancestor. This is already a very obvious hint. Professor Jonathan is a vampire with the blood of the original ancestor. Only in this way can he call his disciples descendants and change his own blood. Combined with the various abnormalities in the school before, he never ate in the auditorium, his face was occasionally pale, there was a faint smell of blood on Monday, and the conversation with Professor Snape. And now, with the prompt of the system, Finney was able to think through and explain everything. Professor Jonathan was a vampire. However, judging from Dumbledore's attitude, he should know about this. It was even possible that Jonathan was invited back by Dumbledore for this reason. As everyone knows, the defense against the dark arts class at Hogwarts has been placed under a powerful curse by a mysterious man. Even Dumbledore cannot lift it. Perhaps only vampires or werewolves, who are dark creatures, can resist it. After all, werewolves are too dangerous for young wizards, so vampires have become a good choice. The next morning, Professor Sprout, head of Hufflepuff, had an herbology class. This course was not something Finney was familiar with. Although he had read a lot of books, it did not mean that he would understand what was in the books. I wrote them all down, so this course was one of the few that Finney didn't add too much to. In the afternoon, there was a charms class taught by Professor Flitwick, the headmaster of Ravenclaw House. Apart from the Transfiguration class, it was also the class in which Finney had the best grades. So, Mr. Black, what question do you want to ask me? After class, Finney found Professor Flitwick, who had a better relationship with him, as usual. Professor, since Ms. Ravenclaw left her own 4-person library, did she leave her own office? In her private library, I saw a biography about her, so I am quite interested in her affairs. Regarding Professor Flitwick, Finney chose to tell part of the truth, at least his purpose. One reason is that Professor Flitwick took Finney to Ravenclaw's private library and became more familiar with some of Finney's previous actions and behaviors. The other reason is that, as the Dean of Ravenclaw College, he wants Professor Flitwick, who is also a student of this college, may have more clues. Sure enough, after hearing Finney's question, Professor Flitwick fell into deep thought and said after a moment. I really don't know anything about Ms. Ravenclaw's office, and it's not clearly recorded in the Hogwarts records. Finney frowned and asked again. So, there are clear records from the offices of the other 3 founders? Hearing Finney's question, Flitwick showed a satisfied smile on his face. Why aren't you a student of Ravenclaw? You are really suitable for our house. Well, in the records of Hogwarts, Mr. Slytherin's office is now your dean's office, Gryffindor. His office is now the principal's office, and Hufflepuff's office is said to be next to the kitchen of Hogwarts, but we don't know exactly where it is. Having said this, Professor Flitwick suddenly asked. By the way, do you know where the school kitchen is? It's just below the auditorium, behind the fruit portrait next to the Hufflepuff common room. If you want to go in, you just need to gently tickle the fruit portrait. A pear that laughs and turns into a doorknob. After saying that, he winked at Finney in an interesting way, as if to tell Finney not to say that he was the one who told the news about the kitchen. Finney also had a smile on his face. Although he was very depressed about not getting the answer from Professor Flitwick, it was still a good thing to know the location of the kitchen. After the dinner, Finney came to the corridor on the 6th floor of the castle at the time specified by Professor McGonagall. Classroom number 21, classroom number 21, classroom number 21. Talking about this location, but still there is no clue. If you can't find the classroom, it is a common knowledge among the young wizards at Hogwarts to ask the people in the portrait. This time, Finney did the same. Unfortunately, those in the portrait no one knows about the so-called classroom 21, and some even bluntly say that this classroom does not exist. It seems that Finney's memory of the castle is correct, and there is no classroom 21. However, Professor McGonagall would not lie to him, so the problem still lies in Professor McGonagall's last sentence, Gamp's basic deformation law. This is definitely a clue. According to the general situation of the Hogwarts Chamber of Secrets, they are usually hidden behind portraits, tapestries, or near a sculpture. Finney searched the entire 6th floor, but there was only one painting that violated Gamp's basic law of transformation. Food was transformed into the painting. So this is it. So, what should we do? Well, like this? I want to enter classroom 21. As Feeney finished speaking, the witch in the portrait nodded and opened the door behind her in the portrait. At the same time, the painting was also opened like a door, revealing a half-person high doorway behind. That's really it. Feeney smiled helplessly. In fact, he was also experimenting. If he couldn't get in like this, he might need to try other passwords, such as separating left and right, opening sesame, etc. Across the hole is an upward staircase. Walking up the stairs, you will see a wooden door, and there happens to be a bronze plaque on the door that says classroom number 21. When you open the door and walk in, you can see this classroom that looks more like an office. There is not much furniture in the classroom, only a few bookshelves and a dozen chairs of different shapes. Before Dumbledore's classroom, this was the office of the Professor of Transfiguration. However, it was a bit troublesome to get in and out, so it was abandoned. Later, I used this place as the venue for the Transfiguration Club. Professor McGonagall walked out of the cubicle in the office and said to Feeney, "Mr. Black, you are here early, but it doesn't matter. I think you have also seen the chairs here, and yours is not among them. The club's rules require you to conjure a chair yourself." Feeney nodded. "I understand, Professor." Then he looked around and found that there was no object that could be used to transform, so he took out a piece of fruit candy from the inside of his robe, took out his wand and clicked on it. Switching spell. The candy began to grow bigger under Feeney's spell, and at the same time it began to change its texture. Finally, an orange single sofa appeared in front of Feeney. Feeney looked at the sofa in front of him and thought for a moment. He took out his wand and transformed the candy wrapper. A sofa cushion appeared in Feeney's hand. He placed the cushion on the sofa. Only then was Feeney satisfied. Nodded. Excellent conversion spell. A clear voice came from behind Feeney. "Are you the newcomer that Professor McGonagall said?" "I am Penelope Cravat. A student of Ravenclaw, but why haven't I seen you in class before?" "Little Phineas Black, you can call me Finny, a new student from Slytherin." "Of course, senior sister, you haven't seen me in class." Penelope looked at Feeney in surprise when he heard Feeney's name, and then froze, probably thinking about the rumors he had heard about Feeney. "Are you that little Phineas?" After saying that, Penelope suddenly understood and hurriedly explained. "Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean it like that, I..." Obviously, this senior was apologizing for her stunned look and surprised look. Feeney shook his head and said, "Senior, you shouldn't have any opinions on me because of the rumors about my brother and my family, right?" Penelope shook his head hastily. "Of course not. I am a student of Ravenclaw. I naturally know that I shouldn't offend an innocent person because of other people's affairs." Feeney nodded and asked, "Then why did senior sister apologize to me? You didn't misunderstand me, nor did you reject me. You were just a little surprised when you heard my name. There is no need to apologize at all." Professor McGonagall on the side said, "Phileas is right, Mr. Black, you are really suitable for Ravenclaw Academy. Okay, let's sit down first. The others will be here soon." "Good evening, Penelope." A taller boy with red hair walked in. When he saw Feeney, he was stunned for a moment, and then said, "You must be new to the club." "I'm Percy Weasley. You have a nice chair." Feeney shrugged and said, "Hello, I'm little Phineas Black, I assume you're cousin Molly's child." The Black family is not only a symbol of wealth and antiquity in the magical world, they are also representatives of pure blood. It can be said that all pureblood families in the magical world today have some kinship with the Black family, but the distance is different. The Malfoy family, the Barrington family, and the Weasley family are obviously relatively close. Among them, the Malfoy family is obviously closer, but the Weasley family is still okay. Arthur Weasley is the son of Cedrella Black, and is considered the great-grandson of Finney's uncle. He is also Finney's. He is a nephew, but because Cedrella Black was removed from the family, it can only be calculated through Molly Weasley, and Molly is Finney's cousin, although it is a bit far away. Percy's expression changed when he heard Feeney's words. In fact, he also knew the relationship between his family and the Black family. However, Feeney's reputation in the magical world is not good now. Of course, the reason why Feeney has such a comment is because it was caused by his table-shaking reports a few years ago. The Ministry of Magic has always been controlled by pureblood wizarding families. Even if it is not completely controlled, it will have some influence, and Percy happens to really want to work in the Ministry of Magic. Therefore, one can imagine his attitude towards Finney. After learning of Finney's identity, Percy never said a word to him again. Finney was not surprised by this, and shrugged his shoulders and didn't care. He was now used to such a cold and ignoring Finney's attitude, as long as it wasn't the vaguely exclusive and targeted atmosphere in Slytherin House. Percy, why do you feel uncomfortable being related to the Black family? This is not what your Weasley family does. A blonde-haired, slightly bald boy walked in. He was a senior from Slytherin House. This is a descendant of a branch of the Malfoy family, so he is Finney's nephew. Of course, they are not directly related. He is also one of the few people in the academy who does not take part in the recent attitude towards Finney. One of the things. You didn't have this level when you were in first grade, Percy. Don't look at a person because of his family. Another boy also walked in. It was Selwyn from Ravenclaw House. Yes, he was a member of the Selwyn family who was friends with Feeney, but his talent was not among the Selwyn family. It's pretty good, so I came to Hogwarts instead of Skull. Long time no see, little Master Phineas. After Selwyn made a sarcastic comment to Percy, he nodded to Feeney and said, Long time no see, William. Feeney replied calmly. William was not a direct descendant of the Selwyn family, but someone who had a good relationship with Feeney was indeed a direct descendant of the Selwyn family. Therefore, he did not need to maintain any extra respect for William. You know, although the Black family is sparsely populated, it is still a family on the same level as the Selwyn family. As the sole heir and current patriarch, Feeney is much more powerful than William in terms of status. Okay, I think you all know each other. Our topic today is the latest article in Transfiguration Today. The author has some new research on the reduction spell here, which is worth talking about. After finishing speaking, he looked at Feeney and said, I suggest you order this magazine for a few galleons as well. As he spoke, he was about to hand a new magazine to Feeney, but Feeney refused. He took out this issue of the magazine from his robe pocket. I've always ordered this magazine, Professor. Penello said with a smile. Professor McGonagall occasionally helps revise the manuscript for Transfiguration Today. Afterwards, Professor McGonagall used this article to explain to everyone the new applications and discoveries of the Restoration Curse in a simple and easy-to-understand way. After the discussion, he also explained some new theories of transfiguration to everyone, which was of great help to Finney. As he listened to the lectures, the experience of transfiguration on the system panel was also increasing, and it wouldn't take long for him to be upgraded. Okay, Mr. Black, if I remember correctly, you have astronomy class after today. It's almost time. After Professor McGonagall finished teaching something new, she said to Feeney. Only then did Feeney remember that he had an astronomy class in the astronomy tower at the end of the day. He hurriedly got up and said hello to Professor McGonagall and left classroom 21. Astronomy was the least magic class that Finney took at Hogwarts. In this course, all the little wizards need to do is to watch the starry sky through an astronomical mirror under the guidance of the professor and understand the various planets, satellites, and their relationships and directions, so as to prepare for astrological divination. Of course, like divination, astrology divination also requires talent. If you don't have talent, you basically can't learn anything. What makes Feeney feel the most uncomfortable is that there is no starry sky model in the astronomy course. The professor uses his fingers to determine the specific positions of the planets, and the students guess the general direction to observe. This obviously has great disadvantages. And loopholes, because no one knows what the other person is talking about at that moment. Fortunately, the textbook has the appearance and approximate location of each planet, and there is no mention of a satellite being regarded as a planet. However, in the final analysis, Feeney still felt speechless and useless about this astronomy class. It does not mean that everyone has the talent for divination, and it is a waste of time for people without talent to learn astronomy. The wizarding world is not the Muggle world. They cannot develop rocket ships to enter space. For most wizards, space is too far away from them. The remaining small number, apart from the divination masters who need the help of astrological divination, are the small number of legendary wizards who can cast some powerful ancient magic through the universe and through the planets in space. Because of the clues given by Professor Flitwick, Feeney no longer needed to go to other professors to ask about the Ravenclaw office. However, he still went to each professor's office after class for various reasons. There are many kinds, but there is actually only one, that is, Feeney needs to go into their office to unlock the achievement. After a lot of hard work, in his system now, the achievement of exploring Hogwarts is as follows. Explore Hogwarts, tour all places in Hogwarts, except, including common classrooms, corridors, stairs, etc., completed, common rooms of the 4 major houses, Slytherin, Ravenclaw completed, professor's office, completed except for the principal's office, kitchen, room of requirement, secret passage, complete room of requirement, heritage treasures of the 4 founders, unfinished, The overall progress is currently 54%. On Saturday morning, Finney was sitting in the corner of the Slytherin table, quietly eating his breakfast, as usual. A little Slytherin snake came over and said to Finney with disgust. "Professor Jonathan asked you to go to his office after breakfast." After finishing speaking, he didn't wait for Finney's answer, turned around and left, as if saying another word to Finney was a disgusting thing. Finney looked at the little snake's leaving figure and frowned. Why did Professor Jonathan invite him to the office? After learning that Professor Jonathan was a vampire, Finney became even more cautious about him. Although vampires are not unable to survive without blood, their bloodthirsty instincts still make them extremely dangerous, otherwise they would not be killed. Classified among the creatures of darkness. As for the defense against the dark arts professors, they all knew that it was a big pitfall. Finney really didn't want to meet Professor Jonathan. However, thinking about the task of making a fateful decision, he hesitated again. If Finney had a friend by his side at this time, he would not hesitate like this and just reject Professor Jonathan directly. If Jonathan wanted to use force, his friend could go to Dumbledore. However, Finney had no friends at Hogwarts. To be precise, Finney had almost no friends around him, no matter where they were. Therefore, he was very hesitant to meet Professor Jonathan alone because he could not guarantee his own safety. It would be impossible not to meet him. It would be completely inappropriate for Finney to rashly offend a powerful vampire at this time. The danger of going to the meeting also forced Finney to think carefully. Finney, who couldn't think of anything to do, had no appetite to continue eating, turned around and walked out of the auditorium. Standing at the door of the auditorium, Finney called softly. "Puffs." A female elf appeared beside Finney in response. "Master, do you have any instructions for calling Puff?" Finney shook his head and said. "Nothing happens at the moment, but please remember, Puff, if I call you later, you will appear immediately and pull me to apparate back home." The elf named Puff bowed to Finney and said. "Puff understands. Master, if nothing happens, Puff will leave first." Finney nodded and let Puff leave here. Puff is Finney's backup, a backup that allows him to leave the house at 12, Grimmauld Place and come to Hogwarts to study in peace. When Finney's mother, Walburga Black, died, Finney ordered Creature to go to the House Elf Resettlement Office of the Ministry of Magic to purchase a large number of young house elves. Puff is one of them. Her magical talent is among the best among elves, let alone compared with wizards. You must know that the magical abilities of elves are generally stronger than wizards. If not for with the contract in their blood, they would not be willing to become slaves of wizards. Of course, they have been accustomed to this for thousands of years. Puff has always been by Finney's side. She will appear whenever Finney speaks. She is not only responsible for taking care of Finney's daily life, but also responsible for Finney's safety, just like a life bodyguard. There is also a team of house elves in number 12 Grimmauld Place specially trained for fighting. When Finney was in the house, they were also led by Puff. Of course, all the house elves were it was managed by Creature, who was like a butler at this time. It can be said that Puff and the combat team under her management are Finney's last line of defense and the most convenient line of defense for him. No matter what happens in the magic world, he can guarantee that he will not be affected. Originally, Finney didn't intend to expose Puff's existence, but the current situation forced him to prepare a way out for himself. After giving Puff his instructions, he headed for the 3rd floor of the castle. Professor Jonathan's office was still the same, empty and simple. It was more appropriate to say that it was an abandoned office than a professor's office. "Professor Jonathan, are you looking for me?" Finney knocked on the door and asked after walking in. At this time, Jonathan was sitting at his desk, looking at something. He looked up when he heard Finney's voice and said, "Ah, it's Blake. I was wondering when you would come over. Come and sit down." Finney glanced at Jonathan warily, and after making sure that there was no other expression on his face, he walked over and sat on the chair. "So, Professor, what do you want to talk to me about?" Jonathan still looked down at a letter on the table, and said without raising his head. Blake, wait for me for a while." Even when he was talking to Finney, he did not stop his hand movements. After a moment, Jonathan raised his head and looked at Finney, and said, "By the way, what do you want to talk to me about?" Jonathan's question made Finney confused. "Didn't you find me? Why am I looking for you?" "Well, Professor, you asked someone to call me here." Jonathan was stunned for a moment, and then said, "Oh, yes, I asked you to come here. I was a little confused because I was busy with some things." "Then Professor, are you looking for me? You should have guessed my identity, right? As the heir of the Black family, it would be a little unreasonable if you didn't know me." Jonathan changed his previous amiable demeanor and instead said with dignity. Feeney was stunned. Based on the clues given by the system and his own findings, he deduced that Jonathan was a vampire. However, what does this have to do with the Black family? There is only one vampire related to the Black family that has been recorded over the years, and that was 500 years ago, when the Black Death was rampant in Europe. The Black family has always had a rule that Feeney finds very problematic and is not going to be implemented in the future. That is, if there is a squib in the family, or if someone marries a Muggle wizard or a mixed-blood wizard, they will be banned by the family. Removal, here is not just being kicked out of the family, it also includes removing their name from the family tree. This family tree is a magical object, and there is this thing on the wall of a room in number 12, place Fenegramall. Every child born in the family will appear on that wall after being named. At the same time, they will also be affected by the entire family's bloodline. If they are removed from the entire wall, their peers will also lose the power of the family's bloodline. Although, Faye doesn't know what this bloodline power means. The topic is a bit off topic. 500 years ago, during the Black Death, a child of the Black family who was known as a squib found the family. Originally this was not allowed, but that child was attacked by a vampire. In a certain he survived with the help of the ancestors, but the whole family was harmed. He also hoped to find some solutions to the family. Although the following events are not recorded in detail in the family records, it is said that the child was a field doctor before becoming a vampire. Even after becoming a vampire, he treated a large number of people as a doctor. When Feeney thought of this information, he instantly understood who Jonathan was in front of him. "Are you that kid?" Feeney asked, but after he said it, he felt something was wrong, because no matter from any point of view, he was his elder, so it was wrong to call him his child. Jonathan didn't care about this sentence, but asked. "So, in the family records, I am just called a child, without any detailed records?" In response to Jonathan's question, Feeney nodded. Although it hurt to say this, Jonathan was really not qualified to be recorded in the Black family's family records. After all, he was not only a mixed-blood wizard, but also a vampire. Jonathan obviously understood this. He sighed and stopped talking about it. He looked at Feeney and told him his true purpose of finding Feeney this time. "Okay, let's not talk about those old things, let's talk about the business." Feeney nodded and looked at Jonathan. "Well, you said. Since you know my identity, you should know that we rarely have descendants, so the heirs are usually chosen from our godson and given him our bloodline." Feeney nodded. He still knew something about the bloodline inheritance of high-level vampires. After all, he had become a dark creature with immortality and powerful power. After speed, he naturally had some disadvantages. The disadvantage of vampires is that most of them do not have the ability to cast spells, otherwise wizards would not allow them to exist. A small number of people with the ability to cast spells were generally wizards before they were transformed, and they were not transformed directly, but were given blood. These are two concepts. The transformed vampire bloodline will be at a lower level than the one that transformed him, and unless the vampire who transformed him dies, he will always be under control. This will not be the case when giving bloodline. The recipient and the giver have the same bloodline and the same level, and will not be controlled by each other. The second disadvantage of becoming a vampire is that it is difficult to produce offspring. Of course, it is not that there are no offspring, but there are very few and it is difficult. Therefore, most vampires, especially high-level vampires, will have one or two godchildren. It's time to give them their own bloodline to ensure that the bloodline of the ancestors and princes will continue to prevent the vampire family from perishing. Knowing is knowing, and understanding is understanding. However, when Jonathan mentioned this at this time, did he really want Feeney to become his descendant? Jonathan continued, while confirming some of Feeney's ideas. "I have never adopted a godson, nor do I have any plans to find descendants, but the bloodline of my ancestor cannot be cut off like this." Feeney frowned. Although everything was consistent with his guess, he was still a little confused. "But, Professor, if I remember correctly, it is very difficult for vampires, especially high-level vampires, to die." Jonathan nodded. "Indeed, vampires of our level can be said to have eternal existence if there are no special accidents. Of course, the premise is that we need to spend a lot of time sleeping, but compared with eternal life, that little time is nothing." "So, Professor?" Feeney asked. Jonathan sighed and said, "There are some problems inside the vampire, which need to be handled by people of our level." Feeney nodded and said, "So, do you think it is dangerous to deal with this matter, or that it may cause the death of vampires of your level?" Jonathan nodded and said, Yes, I came to Hogwarts because of the deal with Dumbledore, and on the other hand, I came to Hogwarts to find a suitable heir. You, who are from the Black family, are the most suitable one. So what is your choice? Finney was stunned, then shook his head and said. I am the heir of the Black family, and I also need to leave descendants for the Black family. As for becoming a vampire, I am very sorry, I don't have this idea yet. Jonathan frowned. Are you sure? You know, inheriting my bloodline will not affect the bloodline of the Black family, and it will even be sublimated. It is not impossible for you to have descendants, but it is a little difficult, and it will not affect your ability to cast spells. Seeing Jonathan's expression turn ugly, Feeney took a few steps back carefully. Feeney shook his head firmly. Have you really thought about it? There was a bit of coldness in Jonathan's voice. Although Jonathan is very dangerous at this time, Feeney has no intention of changing his mind. Vampires may have many benefits, but the biggest problem lies there. Being discriminated against by wizards, it can be said that becoming a vampire, then he is doomed to live in darkness. This is not what Feeney wants at all. What he wants has always been simple, to live well, and enjoy life. Now, everything he works hard is to enhance his strength, because only strong strength can ensure that he can live the life he wants to live. Jonathan just stared into Feeney's eyes. After a moment, he sighed and said. It seems that you really don't want to, so forget it. However, I may not have time to find a new successor, so I will give you this. As he said that, he threw a sealed small pendant to Feeney. Feeney took it and took a look. It was a pendant that was very similar to the blood pact. It also had a drop of blood in it. This is a little thing I made. If you meet someone you think can be my heir later, give this to him. As long as you swear to him, you will never let the blood of this branch be cut off, and you will not take the initiative to harm human beings, you can get my bloodline by living a low-key life. Of course, I still hope that you are the one who uses it. The reward is this note, which contains a little magic I invented. As he spoke, he handed a notebook to Feeney, and then waved his hand to let Feeney leave. Feeney glanced at Jonathan warily, and then walked out of the office. He breathed a sigh of relief after leaving the office. Fortunately, Jonathan didn't take action when he turned to leave. Otherwise, a dispute would have been inevitable. Just as he was leaving the office, a prompt popped up. Task, Choice of Fate, an ancient and powerful existence has taken a keen interest in you and will extend an invitation to you soon. However, for this ancient and powerful invitation, you face, with a difficult choice, has been completed, and the reward is Purple Echo, Jonathan, a special magic. Unlock the Ancestral Approval Quest. Approval from your ancestors. In order to ensure the purity of your own bloodline, you risked your life and rejected a powerful being. Your ancestors are very satisfied with this and hope that you will continue to work hard. The content of the task is to improve the purity of one's own bloodline, recorded in the family record of the bloodline sublimation ceremony. The reward is to improve one's own magic talent, increase the spellcasting level, and increase the magic power content. Feeney looked at the completion of this task and felt a little incredible. It was completed so easily. As for this new mission, he felt baffled. He had indeed heard of the ritual of bloodline sublimation before, but it was not in the family records at all. Also, the reward for this mission was not the effect of bloodline sublimation. Well. After being speechless for a while, Finney started to look at the newly emerged system branches, the Echo system, and the echoes inside. In the Echo system, corresponding echoes can be obtained by completing tasks, achievements, academy treasure chests, etc. The host can choose to wear an echo to obtain the effects and bonuses of the echo, and the echoes can be stacked and upgraded. Echo Atmosphere has 4 levels, white, blue, purple and gold. The higher the level, the higher the bonus. High-level echoes can be obtained through superposition of max-level echoes. Every time you wear Echo, you have a chance to gain some of Echo's own characteristics or magic. Already responded. Jonathan E. Reed, Purple, Level 1, Effect. After wearing this Echo, there is a 30% chance of a blood-sucking effect on each attack. After every 5 uses, a blood-sucking effect will inevitably occur. Magic plus 15, plus 1 per level, Life plus 450, plus 30 per level. Blood-sucking effect, can restore one's own magic energy, recover one's own injuries, and cause corresponding effects to the place. Feeney actually didn't take the task of Destiny Battle to heart. Now it seems that it is still a very useful task. At least the task reward is very good. And the Echo system is also turned on. Although this Echo bonus does not have a big impact on Feeney, the Echo effect is very useful. Because the Echo can be removed at any time, Feeney directly put on Jonathan's echo. The moment the echo was successfully worn, Feeney's world changed before his eyes. Hogwarts Castle, which originally looked normal, now looks filled with lights of various colors. The movable stairs, the portraits on the walls, and the armors in the corridors are the brightest, but the colors are different. Are these traces of magic? Feeney was a little suspicious, because he had never seen this scene before, but now he saw it. Think about it, all he did just now was wear the reverberation system. Thinking of the previous introduction to the reverberation system, did Feeney gain Jonathan's ability to see magic traces? Can all traces of magic be seen? Another question arose in Feeney's mind. In order to get the answer to this question, he came to the 8th floor of the castle and outside the door of the room of requirements. Sure enough, there are traces of magic on this wall, and the color is much darker than what I saw before. If it's like this outside, what about inside? Feeney walked into the room of requirement thinking about Ravenclaw's alchemy laboratory. The reason why he chose this room was because Feeney had a feeling that the secret of Ravenclaw might be hidden here. The reason why he didn't find it was because he didn't know what the secret was. And now that he has the ability to see traces of magic, how could he not give it a try? After all, it doesn't cost money to try. Sure enough, when he walked into the alchemy laboratory, the traces of magic inside were much stronger than those outside, and the traces in one corner were the heaviest. Feeney walked over and found that there was a shelf there. At this time, there was nothing else on the shelf, just an ordinary wooden shelf fixed on the wall. Wait. Fixed on the wall. Feeney suddenly thought, could this be a secret door? Thinking like this, he naturally did not take any action. He took out his wand and cast various spells on the shelf, opening doors, closing doors, moving doors, and transforming doors. In short, as long as Feeney could think of spells and methods that might be related to secret doors, he tried them all. System panel. Name, Little Phineas Walburga Black. College, none. Enrollment date, September 1st, 1989. Health points, 2490 plus 450, normal human is 2000. Magic points, 200 plus 15, young wizards of the same age are 100. Luck points. Exploration attribute, 0%. Well, one can imagine the result. He failed. This is not a secret door. Presumably, if this is a secret door, then how could a being like Ravenclaw not do some means to let the magic here? The traces are buried. However, if there isn't a secret door or something, then why is there such a strong trace of magic? It almost had more traces of magic than the room of requirement itself. You know, as long as magic is used, it will definitely leave traces. Although a skilled wizard cannot clearly know where these traces come from and how strong or weak they are, they can feel whether there are traces of magic here. At this time, Feeney relied on the magical perspective brought by Jonathan's echo to have a sensitivity far beyond that of most wizards. He knew the strength of the magic traces. Although he was still not sure what kind of magic these traces were caused by, these traces of magic, essentially a pointer. Therefore, in Feeney's opinion, the only thing in this alchemy laboratory that might be related to the Ravenclaw heritage treasure is this empty shelf. However, this shelf is neither a secret door nor a door key, nor does it have any traces of other magical rituals. This gave Feeney a headache. None of these things existed, so where did such strong traces of magic come from? Why can't my own magic perspective be more detailed than the specific source of magic traces? Feeney thought with some regret. Feeney, who couldn't find a clue, sat helplessly on the table in a corner of the laboratory. It was a desk, very close to the shelf, right next to the shelf. There was a chair behind the desk, but Feeney was too lazy to walk over and sat directly on the table. So what on earth am I going to do? Feeney muttered with a headache while continuing to stare at this very suspicious shelf. He believed that his magical perspective and speculation were correct. There must be something wrong with this shelf in this laboratory. The biggest question is still that, why should an empty shelf be fixed to the wall? Since it's not a shelf problem, could it be a wall problem? Countless possibilities flashed through Feeney's mind, waiting for him to eliminate them one by one until he found the final correct answer. Time gradually passed, and Feeney finally determined that this shelf was really an ordinary shelf, and those strong traces of magic that had lasted for thousands of years actually came from the wall behind the shelf. Split into pieces. The wand drew a beautiful arc in the air against the shelf and wall, and the bright pink light flew towards the shelf fixed to the wall. Just as Guang Mang was about to hit the shelf, a translucent light mask appeared on the surface of the shelf to offset Feeney's splitting spell. It was a protective spell. Although it was impossible to determine which spell it was obvious that Ms. Ravenclaw did not want others to use such a method to force the passage. The emergence of this phenomenon gave Finny a shot in the arm. This place is indeed related to Ravenclaw's inherited treasure. Otherwise, such a protective spell would not be released. The simplest known defensive spell is the Iron Armor Curse. Of course, this simplicity is relative. For young wizards, the Iron Armor Curse is also difficult. The more difficult part is the spells such as All-in-One Blessings and Patron Saints. The effect that Feeney saw just now was obviously not the defensive spell he was familiar with. If it were just a shelf with a secret, Ms. Ravenclaw would not be able to cast such a spell that would still be effective after 1,000 years. Then if the split curse doesn't work, I guess other spells won't work either. Feeney looked at the situation just now, nodded and said. Since Ms. Ravenclaw doesn't want to use magic to open this place, there must be a way that doesn't require magic. But, what is this way? Feeney suddenly felt a headache. He was not a Ravenclaw, he was a Slytherin through and through. Isn't this scene that requires brain decryption a joke? After complaining in return, he still had to consider what he had overlooked. This embarrassing situation of having a clue but having no clue made Feeney very irritated and even had the idea of turning over the table. It is true that his magic has no effect on the taboos left by Ravenclaw, but what about others? Or rather, of other creatures? Puff. Feeney snapped his fingers and said. With a pop, Puff's figure appeared next to Feeney and bowed to Feeney. Master. Feeney nodded lightly and pointed at the shelf and said. Keep that shelf separate from that wall. Puff nodded. Okay, Master. After saying that, he snapped his fingers out of thin air. There were visible magic energy fluctuations on the shelf in front of me, as if various magics were constantly impacting the defensive magic. Finally, the translucent mask vibrated violently and then disappeared. The empty shelf floated under Puff's control and completely separated from the wall that was originally fixed together. Sure enough, Finny's idea is right. The magic of wizards and elves are two completely different things. They also rely on the power of blood to activate magic. As magical creatures, the magic of house elves must be stronger than that of ordinary wizards. And no matter how powerful Ravenclaw's defensive magic is, it is also aimed at wizards. There must be some loopholes when facing the magic of the elves. Of course, if Puff can't separate the shelf from the wall, then Finny plans to use the Muggle method. Which is to separate the shelf from the wall physically, in short, decoration. Ignoring the shelf controlled by Puff, Finny walked to the wall. Sure enough, in the place covered by the shelf before, there was a very complicated pattern on the white wall, and there was a small groove in the center of the pattern. Master, there is a rune symbol on this shelf. At this time, Puff suddenly spoke. Finny was stunned and asked. What does it mean? Runes are the most commonly used type of ancient magic text, also known as runes. It is said that Odin discovered a magical text after sacrificing one of his eyes with the World Tree. However, in today's magic world, few people can use runes to cast spells. Most ancient magic experts regard this language as a foreign language, a lost language to be restored and learned. Even if you know that this kind of writing is very useful if you study it in depth, whether it is some magic that can only be used through runes, or doing alchemy, you need to learn this kind of writing. However, Feeney still didn't study because he didn't have a clue, or for the same reason. Although I don't know why, it is obvious that there is a very obvious fault in the inheritance of the magic world. In fact, this fault will not be too long from now. But it is this fault that not only caused many powerful war magics to be lost, but also made the ancient magic texts, which were not very perfect, become headless and tailless, making it impossible to learn by oneself. Therefore, Finny did not know any runes, and his action of making Puff appear and flip the table now seemed to indicate that he knew a lot. At least, he did not need to spend time to inquire about the meaning and reconciliation of this rune. Open the way. As for Puff, as a house elf who is considered young now, it is impossible for her to know the meaning of runes. Feeney just asked casually and stopped paying attention. In addition to stopping Puff from punishing himself for not knowing. What he paid more attention to was the closed groove on the wall. Obviously, the mysterious pattern outside the groove is a magic ritual, and the groove in the middle is a key. However, now, Feeney has no clue what the key looks like and where it is. Puff, search this room to see if there are any items that match this groove, or any relevant information. After Feeney gave the order, he found a fairly comfortable place to lie down. After all his troubles before, it was already time to go to bed. Although he didn't need to go back to Slytherin's dormitory to rest, he still needed to sleep. Feeney himself never thought that such a shelf and wall would delay him for a whole day. However, thinking about it, it was a good thing for the people in Slytherin that they were missing for a whole day. They might even expect that they would die outside. Feeny, who laughed at himself, slowly closed his eyes, and poor little Puff began to clean up the laboratory under Feeny's instructions. And she didn't dare to make any noise, because it was against the rules of the elf, and it was not good to disturb her master's sleep. The items floated into the air under Puff's command, and then silently piled up together. The items in the cabinets, boxes, and tables were also taken out by Puff and placed in categories. I don't know how long it took before Feeny woke up from his deep sleep. What I saw was an extremely spacious alchemy laboratory that had been tidied up. Many useless cabinets, boxes, and tables were piled up in a corner. The experimental table is placed in an obvious corner, surrounded by usable alchemy tools, including knives, crucibles, test tubes, and places like the rune table specially used for carving runes. In another corner of the room, there are alchemy products that have lost their effectiveness. It can be said that it is a garbage pile that can be reused. And not far from this garbage dump are some useful things. Puff, did you find anything? Feeny asked. Puff appeared next to Feeny, handed a dinner plate to Feeny and said, Master, this is today's breakfast. In addition, while cleaning up here, Puff only discovered that the pattern on a small box has some connection with the dents. After Feeny took a simple bite of breakfast, he picked up the box and inspected it briefly. Indeed, the surface of the box is engraved with a pattern similar to that on the wall, as well as a relief in the style of the groove. The box itself has no lock and can be easily opened. But it can be said that there are no useful items inside, and there is only a blueprint. It was a drawing of a ring, and the pattern on the ring was the groove on the wall. The drawing also detailed the function of the ring and the runes that needed to be engraved on it. In addition to not having a production method, this was simply instructions for this ring. Feeny frowned. It seemed that the way Ravenclaw chose his successor was through alchemy. This ring was obviously an alchemy item, and it would also be a symbol of Ravenclaw's heir. Moreover, Feeny clearly felt that the pattern of this ring was very familiar as he had only seen it not long ago. But where had he seen it? It's the kind of ring that is very familiar and can be seen often. Someone around you should have this ring. After shaking his head, Feeny decided not to think about where he saw the ring. Instead, he handed the piece of paper to Puff and said, Puff, you cast a spell on this thing that prohibits copying, and then go to Creature and ask him to find someone to build the thing on it. Puff nodded, although she didn't quite understand who could create this ring, but the quality of the house elf prevented her from asking questions. Feeny looked at the disappearing Puff and raised the corners of his mouth slightly. Ravenclaw would never have imagined that the inheritance she left behind could actually be opened in such a way. There is no need to learn these complicated knowledge and skills by yourself, which may even take many years to learn. As long as you have enough gold galleons, it will be enough. Just like asking Puff to open the shelf before, Feeny's action is undoubtedly flipping the table. As for letting Creature forge this ring, Feeny also had his own plan. There are very few famous alchemists in the magic world nowadays. Although this ring can be said to be an entry-level work, there are still a few people who can forge it. And Feeny happened to know one, Ignatia Wildsmith, the inventor of flow powder. Of course, as the inventor of flow powder in the 13th century, she has long passed away. However, the reason why flow powder has been operating all the time also makes many people suspect that the inventor is not dead. Because in the magic world, there is no one from the Wildsmith family except her. People in the magic world don't know that Ignatia actually has descendants, but her descendants are all named Black. Yes, it is Black where Feeny is. However, that branch did not choose to go to magic schools such as Sculler or Hogwarts like other members of the Black family, but chose to study within the family. The cause and effect passed down from generation to generation also made this branch a unique existence in the Black family. They are not good at using magic, but they are all masters of alchemy. They also respected the rules of the Black family and only chose pureblood wizards to marry. However, they even more so married within themselves. Regardless of whether they are members of this branch or marry into this branch, they will be included in this branch, and their descendants will not learn many magics, but learn alchemy. 10 years ago, because of the mysterious man, this tribe's life was very difficult. After Feeny learned about the existence of this tribe, he immediately asked Creature to bring some funds to support their lives. Nowadays, they are one of the few complete members of the Black family. During the years when the mysterious man and Death Eaters existed, the Black family did lose a lot. Not to mention how much Feeny trusts them, but it is still okay to ask them to make an item that they don't know the source of and can only make one item. This is why Feeny asked Puff to cast an irreproducible magic on this piece of paper. He wanted to ensure that only one of this thing could be created. According to his familiarity with this ring, Feeny may not be the only heir to Ravenclaw. Feeny has been mentally prepared for this. However, this does not mean that he is willing to give birth to the ring while he is still alive. Several heirs of Ravenclaw appear. It takes time to complete the ring production, and during this time, Feeny will once again reach his previous state. Living and studying alone in the castle. This situation also gave McGonagall, Flitwick and other professors who were optimistic about Finny's talent a headache. It wasn't that they didn't want to improve Finny's situation, but they were powerless. After all, apart from using the Imperious Curse on the young wizards, there was nothing else to do. Methods can change their inherent views. Without changing the views of these little wizards who are influenced by their families, there is no way to improve Finny's situation. In fact, it is Finny's bad luck. Among the 4 houses of Hogwarts, only the Slytherin wizards have the most stubborn views on Finny, because they are the ones who support the mysterious man the most. Finny's previous behavior, it can be considered that they have completely affected their interests, but Finny is still a Slytherin like most blacks. Among the 4 houses, Slytherin and Finny have the most hatred. Gryffindor is as reckless as ever and doesn't like to use his brain. There are also the most rumors about Finny. Ravenclaws are all smart people. Smart people tend to believe more in their own opinions and are more stubborn. Only Hufflepuff, they just smiled and let it go without paying any attention to Finny. When they met Finny, they were the only one who, 80% of the time, would not look at Finny's academy in a strange way. Professor Sprout also proposed to Dumbledore that Finny should be admitted to Hufflepuff instead of remaining in Slytherin. However, the sorting hat can never go wrong, and the tradition of sorting has been more than 1,000 years old. There has never been an example of changing the house. Therefore, Dumbledore refused. Of course, there is no way to know whether there is a deeper reason. The weekend passed quickly, and it was December. Starting from the second week of December, Professor McGonagall began to compile the list of young wizards who were going home during the Xingdan holiday, as well as the list of students who stayed at Hogwarts, so that the professors could manage them more easily. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, like Muggle schools in Europe, is divided into 3 semesters. There are holidays of different lengths between semesters, namely the Christmas holiday, which is coming soon. 1. The Easter holidays, and the summer vacation, which is the longest, about 9 weeks. Under normal circumstances, Feeny would choose to go home for Christmas. After all, he grew up in the wizarding world, and it does not affect his ability to use magic at home or at school. Yes, the little wizards who return home during the Christmas vacation are not allowed to use magic. However, the little wizards living in the wizarding world use magic. The Ministry of Magic cannot be sure whether it is used by the little wizards, so it is considered acquiescence. And in school, Feeny is still in a state of being ostracized and targeted. Even if he doesn't care at first, he will gradually start to care, especially after comparison. However, this time Feeny chose to stay in school. There was naturally a reason for Feeny to make such a choice. More than half a month had passed, and news had come from Creature that the Ravenclaw ring was expected to be produced on Christmas Day. And the Christmas holiday is also the best time for Feeny to go to the Room of Requirement to explore the inherited treasure. There are no classes, there are no fixed time requirements, and if you don't show up within a certain period, you won't attract the attention of the professors. There is no better time than this. Almost all the little wizards in Slytherin chose to go home during the Christmas vacation. In other words, most of the little wizards chose to go home unless they had to. The 3-month semester has just passed, and there is still no heavy academic burden during the Christmas vacation, so naturally everyone will choose to go home and have a good time. This year's Christmas vacation, only a few young wizards from Hufflepuff House and the Weasley family from Gryffindor chose to stay in school. Even so, the school Christmas dinner was still very grand. After all, this is one of only 4 dinner parties held at Hogwarts a year. Christmas is approaching, and the professors have begun to decorate the auditorium for the Christmas dinner. Hagrid Rube, the gamekeeper at Hogwarts, brought some small pine trees to the Great Hall to use as decorative Christmas trees. Professors Flitwick and McGonagall were responsible for decorating them. Of course, some young wizards who were good at spells or transformations were also captured by the 2 professors. "Oh, Phineas, you came just in time, help me deliver this tree to that corner." Professor Flitwick saw Feeny coming to the auditorium and said excitedly. Feeny looked over and found that the auditorium hall at this time was prosperous and magnificent. The walls were hung with holly branches and mistletoe flowers. No less than a dozen tall Christmas trees were decorated in the hall. Some of these Christmas trees were hung with twinkling icicles. Others were hung with hundreds of lit, sparkling candles. Finney used the levitating spell to transport the bare sapling that Hagrid had just dragged over to the corner where there was no Christmas tree, and at the same time began to decorate the tree with the transfiguration spell. Beautiful transfiguration. If it weren't for the holidays, I would definitely add a few points to Slytherin for your transfiguration. Professor McGonagall walked over and happened to see Finney casting the spell, and he praised. Tomorrow is the Christmas vacation. I originally thought you would choose to leave school. After hearing Professor McGonagall's words, Finney shrugged and said. I'm the only one going back, and all the Slytherin students will go home during the Christmas holidays. It's actually more comfortable for me to stay in school. Professor McGonagall was stunned when he heard what Finney said. As for the situation of the Black family, anyone in the wizarding world who hasn't read the news for decades knows about it. The older generation has passed away. Among the younger generation, the eldest son Sirius he was imprisoned in Azkaban, and his second son Regulus has been missing for many years, and there is still no news. The Black family, which was originally a large number, can now be said to be in decline, with only Finney in some branches of the Black family still there. Seeing Professor McGonagall's somewhat offended expression, Finney smiled and said. It's okay, Professor, I've been here like this for so many years. Hearing this, Mag sighed and said nothing more. After the holidays started, Finney was the only one in the Slytherin common room. He no longer needed to stay in his dormitory or in the room of requirement. He could sit on the sofa near the fireplace and look out the window at the bottom of the Black Lake, as well as the schools of fish, mermaids, and the giant squid swimming by from time to time. Feel the nobility and elegance of the Slytherin common room. As a college that almost all the school directors will carry with them, Slytherin's facilities can be said to be the best in Hogwarts, far surpassing the other 3 colleges. This moment of peace did not bring much comfort to Finney. The magic world would not leave him much time. From the time he started reporting Death Eaters, to now, those pureblood families have almost recovered. It is inevitable to take action against the Black family again in an attempt to annex the Black family's industry. Finney knew very well that his existence must be a thorn in the side of those who had other ideas. In addition to him, Sirius, who was in Azkaban at this time, must also be one of those people's targets. Only after all of Black's heirs are dead, can other families compete for the Black family's property with legitimate reasons. Among them, the families that are very close to Black, such as Malfoy and Lestrange, will be the most profitable. The reason why he is so urgent now is definitely not simply the rejection and targeting of the little wizards. In the final analysis, these things will indeed affect Finney's mood. But more importantly, Finney needs to prevent them from taking action against him in the academy. It is easy to block open and hidden arrows, and being excluded means that he is surrounded by enemies. Even if they are not enemies, they will be bystanders watching indifferently. This is why Finney is eager to change his situation. Finney just sat by the fireplace and slowly fell asleep. The deserted environment gave him an unprecedented sense of security. The next morning, Finney woke up on the sofa and could clearly feel the pain and fatigue in his body. After spending a night on the sofa, it was inevitable to feel like this. However, the physical fatigue did not make Finney feel bad. On the contrary, spending a night in such an environment made his spirit and mood better. Finney's Christmas presents sit under the Christmas tree in the common room. Yes, Finney also has a Christmas gift. Even people in the magical world have to do superficial things. As the sole heir of the Black family, of course it doesn't matter if he is the head of the family. No matter what other families want to do secretly, they will have to show their friendship publicly next year, especially some officials from the Ministry of Magic. The Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge, only took office this year. When political achievements are officially needed, and political achievements also need gold galleons as the basis. The head of the Black family, the richest family in the magic world, is naturally the person he wants to win over. At this time, the largest package at the foot of the Christmas tree was from Fudge. There are also gifts from many professors at Hogwarts, as well as gifts from Narcissa Malfoy. As Finney's cousin and the only one living freely in the direct line of the Black family, she gives Finney a Christmas gift every year. Because of her, the Malfoy family is the only one among the many pureblood families to give him a gift. Not a friendly letter but a gift to the family. What Fudge gave was a brand new set of wizard chess. Perhaps in the eyes of the new Minister of Magic, even though Finney controls all the property and industry of the Black family, he is still just a child. The gift he gave is something that most young wizards would prefer. What Narcissa gave as a gift was a plush sweater. Of course, unlike the Weasley family, this piece of clothing was obviously not knitted by Narcissa herself, but bought in a clothing store. What Professors McGonagall and Professor Flitwick gave to Finney were their notes, which recorded some tips on transfiguration and charms. What Snape gave was a small bottle of intelligence-enhancing potion, which is a potion that can make the user think more clearly in a short time. This kind of potion is not expensive and is also available in the market. However, the quality given by Snape was better, and he should have refined it himself. What Professor Sprout gave was a pot of white fresh herbs. As an herb that is almost extinct in the wild and can only be cultivated artificially, it is undoubtedly very precious. What surprised Finney the most was the gift from Dumbledore. Dumbledore gave Finney a phoenix feather. Phoenixes are extremely rare animals in the wizarding world. The only ones that can be confirmed now are Fawkes next to Dumbledore and Spark, the mascot of the Toramacaw team. Therefore, the value of this thing can be imagined. As one of the wand cores commonly used by Ollivander, the phoenix feather must have magical properties. It is said that the wand with phoenix feathers can cast the most types of magic and is the most proactive, and sometimes even acts according to its own wishes. In addition to the phoenix feather, there is also a note. This is Fawkes' feather. As long as you inject magic into it, Fawkes can feel its existence. Please make good use of it. Looking at the note left by Dumbledore, Finney frowned. He would not believe that it would only be felt if it was activated. In comparison, Finney was more inclined to believe that Dumbledore could use this feather to understand his whereabouts. At the same time, this feather might also be a tool for asking Dumbledore for help. The mysterious man is still alive. When Finney handed the locket to Dumbledore, the two knew it very well. And Finney, who had handed in the Horcrux and reported the Death Eaters, was obviously not someone who would join the mysterious man. Then, it was obvious that Dumbledore wanted to pull Finney into his organization against the mysterious man. Of course, Finney also gave these people gifts. The one given to Professor McGonagall was the latest Quidditch suit. Professor McGonagall has always been a Quidditch fan. For her, Quidditch gifts are more important than gifts about transfiguration are much better. Snape's is some Reincarnation blood, which is a creature that can only be found in the Far East, and due to some reasons in the magical world there, the blood of this creature is rarely circulated in the market. However, Serge the One family has a Reen cattle breeding farm in America, so it is natural to buy some blood from them. What Professor Flitwick gave to Professor Flitwick was a brand new wand maintenance kit, as well as the latest manual for the Barnabas Finkley Excellent Spellcasting Competition, which contains the latest manuals created by wizards who have participated in this competition in recent years. Spellcasting techniques, this would be a great gift for Professor Flitwick, who was once a dueling champion. What was given to Professor Sprout was a sniffing magic plant. After Zygmunt Back developed the potential potion, this plant has gone from being rare to the edge of extinction. Of course, it was also Finney who used some of the Black family's power to get it. Nowadays, the only places that still have this kind of magic plant are magic gardens. Of course, the exchange of Christmas gifts is not the most important thing for Finney today. The Ravenclaw ring he asked someone to make was completed. Creature. Finney snapped his fingers to summon the elf who had served the Black family for many years. Master. Creature looks much more energetic now than when Walburga died. In addition, with the suit wearing the Black family crest, he looks less like a house elf and more like he belongs to Gringotts. Goblin. Here's the ring you want and the instructions. Creature handed a small box containing the ring and the piece of paper to Finney. Finney opened the box and revealed the alchemical product inside, which he called the Ravenclaw ring. It was also the first time for him to see the real thing. It was a completely different feeling than what he had seen on the drawings before. This is a tail ring, but it has a very complicated style. The interface is an oval-shaped unknown gemstone cut into 7 sections. There are no detailed requirements on what kind of gemstone to use in the drawing. However, judging from the functions of the ring required on the drawing, the range of choices for this gemstone should be very small. Even Finney, who doesn't understand alchemy, knows that a spell's direct effect on an item has a time effect, and alchemy uses various substances and methods to permanently fix some spells on the item and create new substances at the same time. A method. Speaking of this ring, there is a vague R-shaped letter in the middle of the oval gemstone cut into 7 cross-sections. This letter is not carved above or below the gemstone, but floats between the gemstones. The kind that cannot be seen by changing the angle. The ring is made of a silver-white metal that looks like silver. Of course, it cannot be made of silver. Although silver has good magic conductivity to a certain extent, in order to engrave on the ring the runes are embossed in relief and have their own abilities. The ring is made of elf metal, a silver-like metal processed by elves. The legendary Gryffindor sword is made of this metal. They can absorb any material that can strengthen themselves. The gems on the ring are inlaid with an eagle-shaped relief pattern that represents Ravenclaw. Combined with the runes on the ring, the entire ring looks much more mysterious. Feeney was very satisfied with the ring and took it out of the box and put it on his hand. This was made by the Black family and was delivered by Kreacher himself. Otherwise, he would not have taken this thing with him easily. He remembered Dumbledore's fate in the original book very clearly. This kind of thing can easily be made into a black magic prop, with a curse or something like that. However, since it was produced by the Black family and sent by the most trusted house elf, there is naturally not so much to worry about. Maybe other families need to be wary of their own, but the Black family definitely does not need it. In other words, Feeney absolutely does not need to guard against the Black descendants of Wild Smith, because they have been addicted to alchemy since birth and have no income. All expenses are paid by the Black family, Feeney's branch. Provided, this is a natural ally. The moment the ring was placed on Feeney's hand, he felt a slight tingling on his finger, and then the entire ring glowed with dazzling light, filling the entire Slytherin common room. After a few breaths, the light dissipated, and Feeney had some other feelings about the ring, as if the ring was another magic wand. However, Feeney knew that this feeling was actually a wand. Illusion, I can only say that this ring has the same ability to channel magic as a wand. Inside the box containing the ring was an instruction note that read, Mr. Phineas Black, when we were making this ring, we found that the production method did not explain all the functions of this ring, just like it did not clearly indicate the material to be used, but stipulated the material from the side of the rune to be engraved on it. This ring has a unique space. Of course, this space is not large. According to our speculation, it can only hold a magic wand. And because of the effect of some runes, although the magic wand can be taken out and used, it can never be separated from the ring. In addition, when making the ring, we deliberately made some processing on the material so that it can only have one owner. In addition, we spent nearly 2,000 gold galleons in total to make this ring. Looking at the instructions on the note, Feeney was a little amused. He believed that the purpose of writing this note was not to tell him the ability of the ring, but to ask for money from him. After all, 2,000 gold galleons was all the living expenses and research expenses of that team in a year. There are indeed some problems with the economic level of the wizarding world. A civil servant in the Ministry of Magic only makes a few dozen gold galleons a month, while a professor at Hogwarts only makes over 100 yuan a month, which translates to about 800 to 4,000 yuan in RMB. In other words, the top salary in the wizarding world is just at the normal salary level in the non-magical world. You have to know that the economic level of the wizarding world has not changed much in nearly 1,000 years. After instructing Kreacher to send some galleons to the Black, Feeney got up and headed to the Room of Requirement. Now it can finally be determined whether what is behind that wall is Ravenclaw's heritage treasure. During the Christmas holiday, not only Slytherin House but the entire Hogwarts school was sparsely staffed. There were even fewer people walking around the castle on the morning of the holiday. Feeney walked from the dungeon at the bottom of Hogwarts to the 8th floor of the castle without meeting anyone else. It can be said to be very fantasy. After entering Ravenclaw's alchemy laboratory again very smoothly, Feeney walked to the wall and put the ring on the little finger of his right hand into the recess on the wall. Suddenly, a light blue light began to appear from the groove as the center, following the pattern traces on the wall and finally covering the front wall. The blue magic light started to be a bit dazzling, and became brighter and brighter, until Feeney had to close his eyes once to avoid the dazzling light. Within a few breaths after he closed his eyes, he felt a huge suction force sucking him in where the ring was on his right hand, and pulled him to start spinning. This portkey was different, and it didn't feel uncomfortable at all. It was as if he was being forcefully pulled close to two walls and endured endless squeezing. Just when he was about to be unable to bear the suffocating feeling of being unable to breathe, all the sensations disappeared, and the dazzling light also dissipated. Feeney opened his eyes in a daze and found that he was already in a room that he had never been to before. At the same time, the system prompts also popped up in his mind. D-side mission, find and inherit the legacy left by the 4 legendary wizards. In the first stage, unlocking a founder's inheritance is completed, and you will receive a reward of +1 designated magic/skill talent. Now start the second phase of the mission, unlock the inheritance of the second founder, and reward the full level of the Patronus charm. This is a closed space with no outside light, somewhat like an underground cave. The space is surrounded by bookshelves, which contain some published books and some handwritten research notes. The content has many aspects, but in the final analysis, they are all related to ancient magic texts. Of course, this ancient magic text refers to it's not just runes, there are also some words that even Feeney, who owns almost all the classics collected by the Black family, has never seen. The directions of the content recorded in these notes are also completely different. Some are studying magic spells based on magic texts, while others are studying transfiguration, potions, and the most complex alchemy. Each notebook had a name written on it, and there was a person in it that surprised even Finney, and at the same time, some of his previous doubts were answered. That man was Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore. Yes, that is Professor Dumbledore, the current principal of Hogwarts, who has many titles and is known as the greatest white wizard. No wonder Finney always felt that this ring had been seen somewhere before. It turned out to be on Dumbledore's hand. Now that he thought about it, Dumbledore did indeed always wear a ring on his right little finger, but that it is unknown whether there is a wand inside the ring. Of course, the bookshelves weren't the most surprising thing about the space. What made him most incredible was that in the middle, surrounded by these letters, there was a pensieve and a small bottle of silver memory. Finney walked over and saw the first line of words engraved on the pensieve. Get my memory inheritance and leave your discoveries to help future generations. A very simple sentence, but the meaning is not difficult to understand. The vial of memory should be the inherited memory left by Ms. Ravenclaw. The knowledge inside is the most precious, and there are more than 1,000 of them on the surrounding bookshelves. Over the years, all Ravenclaw heirs have inherited and developed knowledge based on her memories, and have left a backup here. This is very Ravenclaw, isn't it? Knowledge may be noble, but extraordinary wisdom is the most precious. On the wall behind the bookshelf are engraved the names of each generation of heirs, including the name of Professor Dumbledore. After Professor Dumbledore, there is only one name, Pandora Goldstein. Of course, this name wasn't that obvious, and Finney happened to know her current name, Pandora Lovegood. Lovegood is the surname of a French pureblood family. However, this family has very few members, and they do not respect wizard blood. The only known members today are the editor and founder of The Quibbler. Settled in England, near the village of Ottery St. Catchpole. After this name, there is no other name, that is to say, no one will enter here and become the heir of Ravenclaw after her. However, it doesn't matter. After all, Ravenclaw's secret room is really hard to find. If you find it, you won't be able to get in without a certain level of alchemy, unless you are a table-turning player like Finney. No longer paying attention to the heirs of the past generations, Finney came to the pensieve, poured the vial of memory into it, and then inserted his head into the unknown potion. The use of the pensieve is not a secret in the magical world. Although the thing itself is very valuable and extremely rare, the most important thing is that the potion used in each pensieve is different. This time was completely different from the feeling of reading memories with the pensieve in Finney's impression. Normally, reading memories with the pensieve is done from a third-person perspective, but this time, it seemed to be from a first-person perspective. However, this description is not very accurate. This memory seemed to be directly instilled into Finney's brain, making him feel his head sink and lose consciousness the moment he read the memory. Before losing consciousness, Finney's last thought was that he was ambushed. After an unknown amount of time, Finney sat up from the ground, shook his head, and after making sure that he was awake, he drew out his wand very vigilantly and looked around. Finding that he was still in Ravenclaw's secret room, he was relieved. Just now, he really thought he was ambushed. Now it seems that this may be the inheritance of Ravenclaw, because there are really some things in his mind, some knowledge about ancient magic runes. And the most obvious is that in his system magic book, the ancient magic runes LV7 are clearly marked. You know, now his highest skill level is only LV10V and it is marked as full level. Of course, in addition to the knowledge about ancient magic runes, there are also some messages from previous generations, and they also left messages in their memories. If Finney wants to leave messages or contact information for future generations, he can use the methods in his memory to do it. There is not much information left by the predecessors in this inherited memory. There are only 2 addresses. One was left by a man named Nicholas many generations ago, saying that if future generations have any questions, they can contact him by letter. The other was left by Pandora, and the content is similar to that left by Nicholas. Finney still has some understanding of Pandora. The Quibbler founded by Xenophilius Lovegood is not well known in the magic world, but it also has some loyal readers, and his wife, Pandora, is a spell developer who often develops new spells and runes at home. Of course, the address left by Pandora is not where she lives now, but a Muggle community, which should be her address before she married Lovegood. Compared to Nicholas 600 years ago, Finney is more inclined to contact Pandora. Of course, he will try to seek help as the heir of Ravenclaw only when he really needs help. Otherwise, he will not do anything rashly. However, it is still okay to communicate by letter occasionally, especially when Pandora is about to die. Although Finney does not remember who Pandora is, he is very sure who Xenophilius is and their daughter, Luna. Because he liked this smart, spiritual but often crazy little girl in his previous life, he also knew a lot about her. For example, she lost her mother before her 9th birthday. In any case, Finney has to learn something from Pandora before she dies. Of course, his main task at this time was to digest the knowledge about ancient magic in his brain, as well as the things left by the predecessors in the entire secret room. You know, let's not talk about alchemy and potions, which require talent and long-term practice. Even the knowledge of spells and transfiguration can be said to be very valuable. The predecessors left here are not the kind of achievements that are publicly published. Many of them are based on the results of ancient magic research. For example, the book that Finney is going to take out to read is based on the spells used in ancient magic. In short, it is the kind of spell that can exert a power far beyond normal magic with 1 or 2 words. The Christmas holiday passed quickly. During this period, Finney had been reading and studying the knowledge left by the predecessors in the Ravenclaw secret room in the Slytherin dormitory. Because there were some things to do, time passed a lot faster. On the first weekend of January, the little wizards who left school gradually returned to school. The days when Finney could read books in the common room freely and carefree were far away from him. It was not a big deal for the little wizards to return to school. The real big deal was the dinner time on the day when the Christmas holiday ended. Dumbledore appeared in the dinner hall more or less. Before the food appeared on the table, he knocked the goblet in front of him with a spoon, making a crisp and bright sound. "Everyone be quiet, I have something to announce. Due to some personal reasons, our defense against the dark arts professor, Professor Jonathan E. Reed, needs to leave us temporarily for a while. During this time, our potions professor, Professor Snape, will substitute for you. Of course, if there is a chance, I will also teach you a few classes." Dumbledore's words caused a commotion. The little wizards of the 4 colleges were surprised and shocked by Professor Jonathan's departure. Of course, the most shocking thing was that the substitute teacher would be Professor Snape. As the Dean of Slytherin, his partiality to his own college was well known. Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw are easy to deal with, but Gryffindor protests the most. As everyone knows, Snape is against Gryffindor in addition to his own house. Originally, there was only one potions class, which was bearable, but now there is a defense against the dark arts class, which is fatal. Moreover, Professor Jonathan taught very well in the classes of each school year and was very popular among the young wizards. This comparison shows the gap. Even at this time, some rumors have spread among the young wizards. Do you think Professor Jonathan left because of the curse in the defense against the dark arts class? That shouldn't be the case. In previous years, professors of the defense against the dark arts class had to teach for a full year before something happened. Professor Jonathan has only taught for half a year. Then why do you think Professor Jonathan left? Didn't Professor Dumbledore say it was because of some personal matters? You really believe that? Aren't personal matters secrets that can't be told? In my opinion, it's still a curse, otherwise there's no need to hide it. Similar rumors kept ringing in the auditorium for a while, which made the professors sitting there a little embarrassed. They had heard about the curse rumors for so many years, but the magic world had never cast a curse on a position, nor did it have the corresponding curse magic. What's more, in the past, there have been professors who taught defense against the dark arts for more than 2 years, so the curse does not actually exist. However, in recent years, the fact that professors of defense against the dark arts can only teach for 1 year is here. Even though Dumbledore constantly emphasizes that there is no such thing as a curse, many people in the magic world are still unwilling to come. The reactions of the little wizards embarrassed many professors, including Professor Snape, whose face was dark at this time. He never knew that his status in the eyes of these little wizards would be so low, and there would be so many people whispering bad things about him in his area. This made him a little angry. As a dead Sundra, he decided that the next defense against the dark arts class would be the same as the potions class, and Gryffindor's points would be severely deducted to see if they dared to say bad things about the professor behind their backs. Thinking of this, Snape undoubtedly swept the 4 college score hourglasses at the front of the professor's auditorium, took a closer look, and then was a little surprised. Hufflepuff's score is about to catch up with Slytherin. This won't do. Hufflepuff will also be deducted points next. The house cup must be mine. Feeney was not surprised by Professor Jonathan's departure. He told Feeney his identity before Christmas, and then entrusted his bloodline inheritance to Feeney. From that moment on, Feeney knew that Jonathan the professor is leaving. He is going to do what he really wants to do, which is to resolve the disputes within the vampires. And this matter must be extremely dangerous, and may even lead to death, otherwise he would not come to Hogwarts to find an heir. After all, something that would make a vampire ancestor so urgent must not be a trivial matter. After that, Snape's class did exactly what he thought. In just 1 week, Hufflepuff and Gryffindor became the last and second last among the 4 houses. On the contrary, it was the silent Ravenclaw that overtook the 2 colleges and became the second place. Children's emotions are short-lived, and Snape's disappointment in taking over the defense against the dark arts class quickly dissipated, and he devoted all his enthusiasm to the upcoming Quidditch match. The Quidditch match that started in November is now coming to an end. If nothing else goes wrong, this year's final will still be the same as in previous years, a showdown between Gryffindor and Slytherin. As always, Feeney did not go to the Quidditch pitch to watch today's game, but stayed in the castle. What is even more surprising is that this time there are 2 little wizards who have not left the castle. Their identical looks, bright red hair and freckles on their faces all indicate their identities, the Weasley twins. A pair of brothers who made Feeney feel sad and pity in his previous life. They have been together since birth. They once watched each other's hair turn gray and grow old. That was the only time they grew old together. However, after that incident, the twins became one, and he can no longer use the Patronus charm because all his good memories are with him. However, these emotions were all from the past life. In this life, Feeney somewhat hated the brothers, especially since they would rather not go to the stadium to watch the game but stayed to tease him. After Feeney sent back the notes he had taken out from the secret room, he did not take out any new notes. He planned to digest what he had accumulated during this period. And just when he came to the corridor on the 7th floor, 2 UFOs attacked his face. Just like he had practiced thousands of times, Finney's wand flicked from the inside of his arm into the palm of his hand. Armor protection. The iron armor curse was activated directly. Feeney was not very proficient in this spell, and it was only a poor first level in the magic book. However, it is still very useful to face the 2 unknown spherical objects that are not spells. The 2 objects flew back under the rebound of the iron armor curse and hit the 2 red-haired boys hiding in the corner. A stench followed, and from Feeney's perspective, it was as if there was a deep yellow smoke that was constantly emitting from the mountains between the 2 of them, permeating the entire corridor. Feeney frowned under the threat of the pungent smell and hurriedly cast another head-soaking spell on himself. Transparent bubbles enveloped Feeney's head. George Flanders. I don't remember provoking you, so you want to start a war with me? Feeney's tone was very bad, and the right hand of my wand was slightly tilted. This is a little habit of his, so that when using magic, it will be smoother. If you look carefully at Finney's hand holding the wand, you will find that Finney does not hold the entire wand like other little wizards. He holds the wand between his index and middle fingers and uses his thumb to help prevent the wand from deflecting. In fact, except for young wizards who are still in school, many wizards who are good at dueling have their own hand gestures for holding wands and their own spellcasting techniques. Of course, today's Feeney does not have any superb spellcasting techniques, so things require years of practice. If it is your own technique, you need constant research and improvement. Only wizards who are good at this or good at dueling will do this. Professor Flitwick, who teaches the charms class, is very good at casting spells, and the way he holds the wand is also very special. He holds the wand between his index finger and thumb to cast spells, which makes the wand more stable and flexible. George and Fred were not angry when they heard Feeney's words, nor did they take out their wands. Instead, they looked at each other and started laughing. At the same time, they looked at Feeney excitedly. Wow, man, how did you do that? You gotta teach us. Really, this spell is great. We can invent many pranks with this spell. The 2 of them kept talking to each other, which made Finney, who was already a little impatient, even more angry. He raised his wand and pointed it at the 2 of them and asked, "Are you kidding me? Or do you Weasleys also think that I am a pawn of you-know-who like the rest of the Black family?" When George and Fred heard this, they were both stunned. After a moment, they smiled and said, "Man, you're really overthinking this. We're just here to thank you for your anger at Percy before. Really, we've never seen Percy so angry. My face turned red with anger, and I said I wanted to write a letter to my mother. Oh, poor Percy, he doesn't know that his mother will never come to school to blame Black for his things. I think he really doesn't know." The 2 of them spoke exactly like one person. Although they seemed to have a good understanding, it also gave Finney a headache. "So, you came to me just to thank me?" The twins smiled and nodded. Finney suddenly felt a headache. "And your way of thanking me is to throw such disgusting things at me?" George suddenly said. "This is a dumb ball, a great joke prop." Fred smiled and nodded. "We also plan to open a joke shop in the future." Finney shook his head helplessly and waved his wand. Clean it up. Help George and Fred clean up. He wiped off the dirt on his body. First of all, I didn't mean to embarrass Percy Weasley. He came to provoke me. Besides, I think you don't know why he was embarrassed. Otherwise, I think you wouldn't come to thank me. The twins are very curious. When they heard Finney's words, they couldn't help but move closer. Tell me, how did you do it? Finney shrugged. It's very simple. Every time he wanted to target me in the Transfiguration Club, I just said that your mother Molly was my cousin. Do you understand now? Nephew George, nephew Fred. George and Fred's smiling faces suddenly froze, and then they remembered that Finney was related to their mother, Molly Weasley. In fact, Finney is actually closer to Arthur Weasley. However, Arthur's mother was removed from the Black family, so he is considered a relative to Molly. If we count Arthur's relationship, George and the others are going to call him Grandpa Finney. Pureblood families are so fun. As long as your parents are old enough, your generation is high enough. Finney is an obvious example. He even wondered if he was targeted because most of the little wizards in Slytherin called him uncle. The Gemini's expressions became normal after a breath. George and Fred sandwiched Finney on the left and right. Don't talk about these messy kinship relationships. Let's talk about our own affairs. That's right, that's right. Finney suddenly had a black eye, but he still had a good impression of these twins, not only because of some reasons in his previous life, but also because in today's environment, there are too few young wizards who dare to be on good terms with him like this. However, the Weasley family, who are known as pureblood traitors, may not really care about the opinions of other families. The behavior of George and the two also gave Finney the idea of visiting the Weasleys during the holidays. After all, the reason why he is in such a simple situation now is because he has no allies. Dumbledore's identity is not suitable for him to publicly stand up for Finney and protect the Black family. However, the Weasley family has no problem at all. Maybe he can also support their family. It is said that their family's life is very difficult. Just when Finney was distracted and George and Fred were hugging him, a loud bang sounded from beside the three people, and the glass in the castle corridor shattered. Blood-red smoke rushed in and turned into human figures. These people all had magic wands in their hands and attacked the three Finneys as soon as they appeared. No matter how vigilant Finney is and how proficient in magic he is, this is the first time for such a real battle. Armor protection. When faced with an attack, the subconscious reaction is still the iron armor curse. Although his iron armor curse dissipated after withstanding a wave of attacks, it was still better than the two unlucky red-haired guys next to him. Fortunately, the other party used the sleeping curse instead of the death curse. Otherwise, all three of them would be here today. Because the iron armor curse was too weak, it did not reflect the spells of these sudden terrorists. Fortunately, Finney's reaction was very quick. When he was sure that he did not have an effective and powerful attack spell, the spell he used was more of a control spell. All petrified. The petrifying spells were directed towards the other party, and the other party didn't seem to want to ask for their names. They used either petrifying spells or sleeping spells. Finney, who had no advantage in the first place, was now at a one-to-many disadvantage and was quickly controlled. The target is obtained, let's retreat. The leading man in red said. Another man next to him asked, pointing to George and Fred. Boss, where are these two boys? The leader waved his hand and said. They didn't see us, just leave them here. It's not the time for us to be at odds with Hogwarts yet. Understood. As he spoke, several people turned into groups of red shadows and flew out. This should be a flying spell. It is said that the Death Eaters 10 years ago also had a spell similar to this. Members of Dumbledore's Order of the Phoenix also mastered a spell that allowed them to fly in the form of white smoke. Time goes back to when Finney met George and Fred. At the same time, there was a commotion on the Quidditch pitch. Slytherin seeker Marcus Flint caught the golden snitch and ended the game. Ravenclaw match, and the result of this is that the Quidditch roles are Gryffindor versus Slytherin, everything is the same as in previous years. Although it was an expected result, it also made many young wizards excited. After all, Quidditch is a rare sports game in the wizarding world. Amidst the noise of the little wizards, the school professors ignored a group of beings flying in from the main entrance of Hogwarts and the Black Lake. A lot of blood-red smoke appeared on the Quidditch pitch, and after landing, it turned into a series of masked wizards wearing black and crimson robes. As soon as they landed, these dark wizards took out their wands and attacked the young wizards and professors of Hogwarts. Ordinary little wizards are no match for these dark wizards. Coupled with the unexpected attacks, many people were hit by the sleeping spell. Within a few breaths, the professors headed by Professor McGonagall also reacted, took out their wands and started to fight back. Colorful lights are constantly flashing in the stadium. From time to time, dark wizards were knocked down, and young wizards were also knocked down. Soon, the young wizards in the 6th and 7th grades, under the coordination of the prefects and student council presidents, took out their wands and began to cooperate with the professors' counterattacks. The dark wizards were gradually at a disadvantage. However, they were too well prepared, not only in time for Dumbledore to attend the Wisengamot conference and no longer in Hogwarts, but they also prepared a large number of personnel cannon fodder, which was constantly being replenished by the dark wizards. The battle situation slowly became stalemate. But everyone knows that this stalemate will not last long. Once the dark wizards are replenished enough, or Dumbledore returns, the raid will end. At the moment when they realized that Dumbledore might arrive later than they could replenish their personnel, Snape, Flitwick and others also began to use powerful spells. As a former Death Eater, Professor Snape has been studying dark magic since he was in school. And Professor Flitwick, who was once one of the geniuses of Ravenclaw and won many dueling competitions. Together with Professor McGonagall, who is far superior to others in the field of transfiguration, the destructive power of the three professors combined is absolutely astonishing. After several streaks of red smoke flew out of the castle and took out Hogwarts, the dark wizards on the court also gave up resistance and began to escape. The divine edge is shadowless. Of course Snape didn't allow it. A powerful spell knocked down one of the dark wizards and was unable to fly away again. There were several other professors who were doing the same thing as him. Everyone knew very well what the dark wizards who entered the castle must have done, but they were not sure yet what it was. So we need to capture a few dark wizards and wait until Dumbledore comes back before questioning them. The professor on the field, due to the sudden attack and the commotion of many young wizards, they did not know that there were still 3 young wizards who did not come to watch the Quidditch match, and 2 of them were sleeping in the corridor on the 7th floor of the castle. The other one has been taken away by the dark wizards. It is obvious that Feeney is the target of these people's actions this time, but whether it is because of the Black family's affairs or something else is unknown. Finney woke up in a cave. Darkness, dampness, and biting cold wind were the only feelings he felt at this time. With the moonlight coming in from nowhere, Feeney could barely see the surrounding environment clearly. To his surprise, the ground where he was at this time was made of cement, not stone or soil like in his natural cave. Therefore, this place should have been created artificially. The surrounding walls are not flat, but they still have artificial traces to the touch. Feeney touched his sleeve. The wand was not in its original position, and even the leather case used to hold the wand was gone. This discovery made Finney a little scared. As a wizard, the wand can be said to be their second life. At this time, Finney obviously lost his wand. At this time, he also remembered what happened before, the attack in Hogwarts Castle. I don't know what happened to the brothers. Puff. Finney made a slight sound, calling for the house elf who had been following him in theory. But he didn't hold out much hope. In the castle, Puff's absence meant that something happened that he hadn't thought of in advance, which delayed Puff's behavior. Now, Puff will not appear here anymore. With no house elf and no wand, Finney could do nothing but pray that he was okay. It's not that he can't cast spells without a wand, but let alone the magic spells he can cast without a wand, they are all commonly used life spells. It is a big problem that the power of casting spells without a wand will be reduced. After all, he had just lost to those people once, and he would not have one without a wand to cast spells. Is the boy awake? Just when Finney was thinking about what to do, a voice came from outside the cave. When Finney heard the sound, he rolled his eyes and lay back, closing his eyes and pretending to be awake. Master, he hasn't woken up yet. A trembling voice answered the previous question of the majestic voice. The majestic voice was a little angry. What's going on? Didn't I tell you that if I want to live, I can only use the sleeping spell on him? Master, what we use is the sleeping spell. The second voice was still trembling, and Feeney could hear the growing fear in it. Then what happened to him? There was endless anger suppressed in the first voice. Maybe. What could it be? Returning to the master, when we captured this kid, he resisted for a while. He must have exhausted his magic power and fell into a coma. It's possible. After all, he is just an ordinary little wizard, and his magic power is limited. Reed? Professor Jonathan? So they are vampires. When Feeney heard the first voice mentioning Reed's name, he immediately thought of Professor Jonathan. Then why are they looking for me? Didn't the professor say this was an internal problem among their vampires? Have you searched him? The first voice continued to ask. After a search, this is all he had on him. The second voice replied, and at the same time, he probably handed over everything on Finney's body to the first voice, including his wand case, pocket watch, some commonly used white essence, and wallet. Huh. This guy is quite rich. Are you sure he doesn't have anything else on him? Yes, master, he only has a robe and a ring on his body at this time. Ring? Why didn't you take it off? When Feeney heard this, he realized that the Ravenclaw ring on his hand had not been taken off. Return to the master that ring, we can't take it off. Oh. It's still a magic item, a product of alchemy. Will he chop off his fingers if he doesn't get there? The words spoken by the first voice made Finney tremble, and at the same time, the second voice trembled. Master, this is not okay, this kid is not one of ours. If we hurt him, it will anger Dumbledore. Dumbledore? Humph, he won't live long, but you are right, you still have to give him some face while he is still alive. The first voice snorted coldly and continued. When he wakes up, torture him carefully to see where he put the thing. We got the news that Reed did give him the thing before. Yes, master. There was no sound after that. After waiting for a moment to make sure they were all gone, Feeney got up from the ground. Now he is sure that these people are all vampires. Even if they are not, they are related to vampires, and what they are looking for should be his blood inheritance that Professor Jonathan gave him before Christmas. So, they want the ancestors' blood. But that's not right. If you want the blood of the ancestors, it means that they are not the ancestors. Even if there are more people, they will not be the professor's opponents. After all, the professor, as an ancestor, will not have fewer people under his command. Feeney was very confused, unless the one that Jonathan gave him was not the real blood of the ancestor, but something more precious, so precious that the vampires wanted to get it even if they resisted the ancestor and offended Dumbledore. Thinking of this, Feeney breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he stayed in the room of requirement after Jonathan gave him the thing. Otherwise, it would be unclear what his situation would be like after these people achieved their goals. Now we can only hope that the school professors will find out that he is missing as soon as possible, and then look for him with Professor Dumbledore. As for resistance, no wandless spellcasting without combat magic. In such a situation, Feeney never thought of resisting, unless he didn't want to live anymore and wanted to die quickly. I don't know where I am now, whether Professor and the others can find me, and what happened to Puff. She didn't appear directly when she was attacked. Feeney, who has many doubts, knows very well that all he can do now is wait without exposing what Jonathan gave him. And if you want to avoid being exposed, it is very important to have a magic spell that Feeney has not learned, and that is Occlumency. He didn't believe that a wizard who disliked vampires' civil strife wouldn't be able to use Legilimency. Thinking of this, he opened the system in his mind and checked the remaining college treasure chests that he had not opened, as well as the library passes that he had not redeemed. In today's environment, if you want to obtain Occlumency and complete tasks, it is definitely too late to learn now. All Feeney could do was to gamble and see if the numerous academy treasure chests and passes could be used to extract Occlumency. If this didn't work, he would have no choice but to go to the mall to buy one. You know, buying one in the mall, the gems needed for Occlumency are almost 1/3 of the gems he has saved over the years. You know, he has been saving gems for almost 10 years. From this, you can see how dark this system all is. Facts have proved that Feeney's face has always been very handsome. From all the more than 20 passes, he drew a dozen Occlumency cards and 3 Legilimency cards. In addition, the Occlumency spell obtained from the Academy's treasure chest is enough for him to reach the highest level of this magic. After Occlumency surgery, Feeney felt much more at ease. At least he didn't have to worry about the other party's Legilimency forcibly detecting where he had placed the thing given by Professor Jonathan. As for Veritaserum, Feeney doesn't believe these vampires have it. This potion was forcibly banned from circulation by the Ministry of Magic because of its effect. Nowadays, it is only available in the hands of magic masters and in the Ministry of Magic. Moreover, it is difficult to refine this potion. It's not much simpler than Buffy's brain-boosting potion, and vampires naturally don't have it. After all, only high-level vampires have the ability to cast spells, and becoming a potion master who can refine Veritaserum requires higher talent. Nowadays, the number of vampires is not as large as before, so the probability of a potion master existing is lower. Finney's behavior of extracting magic from the system cannot be seen from the outside, but don't forget that he did it after getting up from the ground, that is to say, he was standing at this time, and the unlucky it happened that the man in red who kidnapped him earlier came to see if Feeney was awake. Ah, this wizard kid is awake. You guys go tie him up and search him to make sure there is no wand on him. By the way, cut off the finger with the ring on it. The words of the man in red were naturally heard by Feeny, who was still in the system interface. You know, even in the magic world, there is currently no way to reconnect a broken limb. If it is just broken, you can still use healing and some magic potions to restore it, but as time goes by, it will be too late. Moreover, who can guarantee that these vampires will destroy the finger after cutting it off? With the existence of Hogwarts and Dumbledore, Finney believed that they would not kill him, but he still had no fear of turning himself into a cripple or something. Therefore, at this time, Feeney's resistance is already something that must be done, and it is very urgent. However, none of the combat magic he knows now can be used to cast spells without a wand. Even though this is the most powerful wizard system, it is very convenient to learn magic. It is not difficult to master it and use it skillfully. It is enough to accumulate the number of uses. However, if you think about it, it is much more difficult to cast spells without a wand, or even to cast spells silently. Moreover, many combat magics cannot be used frequently, such as the death curse. If you want to use it, you must have a useful target. If you can't use it, your level will naturally not be very high. So, what Feeny needs right now is a magic wand. He had already felt that the two vampires who came to control him were low-level beings who could not cast spells, so naturally they did not have wands. The idea of seizing the wand from the enemy's hand was shattered. Fortunately, Feeny also has a system mall, so you can still buy a wand. It's just a bit expensive. Ordinary wands use common magic wood as the wand body. Using dragon nerves or unicorn feathers as the wand core requires more than 3,000 gems. A better wand, with a core made of precious and rare wood or precious animals such as phoenix feathers, costs more than 4,000 gems. For the better wands, such as snakewood and elder, which are precious, rare, or even extinct, the core material of the wand will cost over 10,000 gems. And this is not the most expensive one. The most expensive one is the Elder Wand. The one in Dumbledore's hand at this time costs 9.99 million gems. Of course, the specific price depends on the materials and effects of different wands. In addition to these wands with specified materials, there is also a customized wand that costs 30,000 gems. The specific material and wand core are specially designed by the system according to its own characteristics. Customized, you can also customize the appearance. One advantage of such a wand is that it must be the most suitable wand for you. And because of the system, this wand will have only one owner. Even if it is taken away, it cannot be used. It also has positioning and recycling functions. At this time, Feeney's situation was very critical. Naturally, there was no time for the system to scan his body and personality to customize the wand, or even design the appearance. After all, the appearance of a 30,000 gem wand must be what you like. But now Feeney's situation means that he can only buy a random wand for fighting. A direct system search revealed that the wand has a hornbeam body and a dragon heartstring core. It has the same body and core as the wand that was taken away by the vampires. As for the style and size, it doesn't matter. Time is everything at this time. Buy directly, 3,972 gems disappear, and the wand appears in Finney's hand at this moment. The gangsters fall to the ground. Armor to protect yourself. Finney took advantage of the time difference when the vampires did not react, and directly attacked and put down the two vampires closest to him. At the same time, a strong armor spell was also quickly released by him, which just happened to resist the disarming spell of the red-clothed vampire outside the dungeon. God of Swords. The armor spell rebounded the disarming spell of the red-clothed man, and the red-clothed man's magic wand flew high, and Finney took this opportunity to hit the vampire directly with a powerful attack magic similar to black magic. The God of Swords was invented by Snape, and Finney could not learn it originally. However, when he opened the college treasure chest just now, he opened Snape's potion textbook, Half-Blood Prince version, when he was a student, and obtained the extraction rights of this spell. As a result, the next treasure chest opened this spell, and it opened 3 in a row at once. The spell passed through the gap in the iron fence of the dungeon and passed through the neck of the red vampire. The red man immediately lost his life. His head was separated from his neck and fell to the ground under the effect of the spell. At this time, Finney realized that the cave was actually a dungeon. Under the faint light at the entrance of the cave, he noticed the very hidden iron fence. Because these vampires were ready to take Finney out, the lock on the fence was open. Otherwise, even if Finney knew the unlocking spell, he couldn't get out. After all, the cells in the magic world were all cast with anti-unlocking spells. After coming out, Finney walked vigilantly in the direction of the red man with a wand. Not far away, he came to a tunnel. There were braziers hanging on the walls on both sides of the tunnel. In the braziers was a blue flame, without fuel, it just kept burning. Seeing these flames, Finney immediately thought of a legendary flame, the Goobler Fairy Fire. It was a magical flame that could burn forever without any fuel. Unlike the fiendish fire, which was also a flame that would burn forever if it was not extinguished, the fiendish fire needed fuel and could not be easily controlled, while the Goobler fire did not need to be controlled at all. They would remain in the position where they were created unless you took the initiative to move them. This kind of flame was created using a very advanced magic that many adult wizards could not use. Therefore, this kind of flame was relatively rare in the black market. Of course, most of the time, no one would sell this kind of flame. It usually appeared in the form of a bounty. Looking at the flames on the walls on both sides, if Finney was not mistaken, they were the Goobler fire. Then, the vampire clan might really be as the Muggles thought, not lacking in money. Even richer than most wizard families, while werewolves, who were also dark creatures, were just the opposite. Many of them did not even have the money for daily life, and it was already difficult for them to survive. In addition to the Goobler fire, there were tunnels on the walls on both sides that were like the caves he had walked through. This should be a big dungeon for the vampires who kidnapped you. However, strangely, there are no vampires guarding here. Are the vampires really not afraid of the prisoners in the dungeon escaping? Of course, it may be inaccurate to describe it as prisoners. Just when Finney was puzzled, a message suddenly popped up on the system. You were kidnapped here for no reason and luckily escaped from the enemy's cell, but it is only a small step to safely leave this dark and dangerous place. Facing an unknown number of enemies, you are alone and realize that you need help very much. Looking at the cells around you, a brilliant idea comes to your mind. Mission: escape from the castle. The first stage is to rescue the people imprisoned by the vampires. The rewards will be distributed after all the tasks are completed. Looking at the task that suddenly appeared, Finney frowned. In his original plan, he was going to leave here directly. If he could find his wand, it would be the best. If not, he would find a fireplace leading to other places or leave here directly. When he left the restricted area, he would by apparition and leave here. Although this plan was a bit dangerous, it could be said to be the safest. After all, it was the least noisy. As long as he could escape to the vicinity of Hogwarts, Finney would be completely safe. He didn't believe that after the previous incident, Dumbledore and his men would allow the castle to be invaded again. But at this time, the system's task gave Finney another idea, to escape with the help of the people imprisoned here. Without thinking about the task reward, Finney turned directly into the tunnel closest to him. Like the tunnel where he was imprisoned before, it was also dim and humid, and there was even a faint odor in the air, but the smell was not strong, so Finney naturally ignored it. Going inside, there is a staircase going down, which is beyond Finney's expectation. He thought that these cells were all on the same plane before, but now it seems that there may be a vertical drop. Going down the stairs, it is still a tunnel, but this time there are braziers on the walls on the left and right. Although they are very rare, they can bring a little light to Finney in this darkness. It also allows him to see the surrounding environment clearly with this light. This tunnel is very similar to the tunnel Finney came down from before. There are various branches on the left and right, but this branch is very short. You can see the cells inside at a glance. The cells here are not comparable to the cells Finney was in before. They are not only small, but also very crowded. There are many people imprisoned in each cell. Most of these people are women. Although they look very sloppy at this time and have not cleaned themselves for a long time, Finney can still see that they are not much older than him. They should all have just graduated from magic school. The faint stench that Finney had smelled before became clearer and stronger after he came to the lower level. This pungent smell actually came from these cells. Finney noticed that some of the women in the cells had died. They were not killed directly, or starved to death, or died of illness, but died in a very strange way. All the dead people didn't look like normal humans. They were all dried up like skin and bones, as if a strong suction force had sucked all the blood out of them. This was the territory of vampires, so it was expected that something like this would happen. However, what made Finney feel strange was why these dead bodies were just thrown here. And although vampires are bloodthirsty and dark creatures, they are actually very elegant creatures. Even if they are bloodthirsty, they prefer the blood of young women. Now these women can no longer be described as sloppy, but dirty. It is impossible for those vampires to have the appetite to touch them. This is not right no matter how you look at it. Just when Finney was confused, a woman in a cell suddenly cried out in pain. This miserable cry directly awakened Finney from his deep thoughts. Finney then noticed that as the cry from that cell appeared, the women in other cells were looking at the walls and floors around them in horror, as if there were things in those places that could take their lives. Finney was confused and quickly came to the cell where the screams came from. When he walked in and took a look, the scene inside was completely beyond his imagination. The few women who could scream and wail just now had turned into the skinny corpses he had seen before, without any life left. Underneath these corpses, red light was flashing on the surrounding walls. Those lights are like silk threads, drawing patterns on the walls and floors, which are very strange. And Finney, who had recently received the Ravenclaw inheritance, happened to know that these were not patterns but an ancient magic script. Unlike runes, they are a rare vampire writing. Logically speaking, except for some wizards who specialize in ancient magic texts, even the vampire clan does not have mission information for this kind of text. Now that it suddenly appears here and seems to be able to function, it is very fantasy. Although Finney doesn't know the specific function of these words, he can be sure that there are these words in every cell here, and it is because of them that the women imprisoned here are drained of blood from their bodies. Died of blood. It seems that all the blood has been stored. Finney suspects that the vampires don't care about this place at all. Only when all the women here are dead will they come to clean up the place and close in a new group of humans. But why do these vampires use the effect of this ancient magic script to collect blood? You know, for vampires to suck blood, they only need to bring these captured people directly. It would be great if they do it directly. Not only is it fresh, but it can also satisfy their bloodthirsty. In doubt, Finney stretched out his wand and pressed it against the lock of the cage fence. It is true that the locks here are protected by anti-lock spells and cannot be opened with lock-picking spells. However, there is a very powerful loophole in the magic world. Many powerful wizards will subconsciously ignore it, and even weak wizards will ignore it. That is, all their magic arrangements are aimed at magic spells and are not methods to prevent muggles. You cannot use the lock-picking spell to open the lock. In fact, besides using the key, there is a muggle method, which is to pick the lock. Finney doesn't know how to pick locks with muggles, but he also has his own method, a simple extension spell of Wand Transfiguration. Wand Transfiguration is the rarest branch of Transfiguration, because it is not commonly used, but it is very practical. The uses announced by the magic world today include turning a wand into ears to strengthen one's hearing, or to steal something. Listen to something. There are also reconnaissance methods such as turning into eyes and turning into noses. These magic spells are only often used by aurors. The little magic spell developed by Finney is based on these usages. Put the wand in front of the lock that needs to be opened. The wand will extend into the lock cylinder and then turn into the corresponding key to physically open the door. With a click, the cell door was opened easily by Finney. When he walked in, the red light on the wall had not completely dissipated. And Finney also felt the suction force on it. If the light hadn't almost dispersed, then Finney's blood would have been sucked out. Just when the red light completely dissipated, the same wailing and screaming as before came from another cell. Is this thing always running? Random cell? Finney frowned, very confused. He still couldn't figure out why vampires store so much blood. You know, they don't have to drink blood to stay alive. Their food is the same as that of humans. However, some people are bloodthirsty and will become weak if they don't drink blood. Shaking his head, Finney felt that he could not delay any longer. Since these vampires had dragged him into this matter, they must be prepared for his revenge. The first step in revenge is to interrupt their preparations to store blood. Just when Finney thought of this, the system came out to refresh the sense of presence again. As someone who wants to be the strongest wizard, how can you be easily provoked by others? Let the world know the consequences of provoking you. Mission: Revenge against the vampire clan. Rewards are calculated step by step based on the degree of revenge. Since the system has sent out a mission, it must be done. The vampires are just waiting for revenge to come. Finney smiled slightly and pressed the wand in his hand against a rune on the ground. Although he doesn't know the function of these runes or the principles, destroying them is always more difficult than making them. A powerful rune formed on the tip of Finney's wand and was engraved on the ground. The moment this text symbol appeared, there was a vibration in the cell and the sound of objects splitting. No matter what these runes are for, they must be part of a magic circle ritual, and it is very easy to destroy it. As long as a powerful and difficult to understand rune is strongly inserted into this extremely stable system, it will cause the system to collapse. The so-called blood-sucking runes naturally don't work. Following Finney's movements, the constant wailing suddenly stopped, leaving only the sound of violent breathing after experiencing the pain. Finney got up and used the method of opening this cell to rescue the women in other cells. After asking, I found out that many of them are Muggle-born wizards or Muggles. There was a wizard in almost every cell, and the rest were Muggles. This is in line with Finney's judgment. After all, compared with the small number of wizards in the magic world, the large number of Muggles in the Muggle world is more in line with the population ratio of the vampires' large-scale massacre this time. However, this judgment also made Finney a little disappointed. If there were more wizards among these women, it would be more helpful for them to escape from here. However, it is better to have something than nothing. After asking who has more combat experience, Finney handed the wand of the red vampire he killed to one of them. This woman is not much older than Finney. She is only 19 years old this year. She just graduated from Durmstrang Academy. After graduation, she joined the Swedish Ministry of Magic in Northern Europe and became an Auror. She was arrested in a battle against vampires. Fortunately, she is lucky. Until now, her cell has not been randomly selected by runes. Born in Durmstrang, a school that teaches black magic, and has been an Auror, her experience and combat power are stronger than others. This wand is naturally given to her. After teaching her the previous lock-opening spell, Finney decided not to rescue the people in other cells himself. Returning to the previous tunnel filled with Gublai's fairy fire, Finney continued to explore forward. Slowly he saw a ray of light, which was different from the light reflected by the fairy fire. It was the light of the sun. Walking over quickly, you saw a staircase leading upwards, and the light was reflected from the doorway on the staircase. Finney tightened the wand in his hand and carefully stepped onto the steps. He knew very well that there were no guards in the tunnel he just passed through, so there must be guards at the door of this dungeon. The vampires could not let the blood food and prisoners they captured escape easily. Finney's judgment was completely correct, because when he was about to reach the door of the dungeon, he heard some noises coming from outside the door. How long has Craven been down? Why hasn't he come up yet? An aging and dignified voice asked. At this time, another much younger voice answered in an indifferent tone. Don't worry, he's just a little wizard, and a little wizard without a wand. Craven can handle it by himself, not to mention that he brought 2 low-level vampires with him. After hearing this, Finney also understood that the red vampire he killed before was named Craven, and the vampires outside had begun to wonder why he hadn't gone back yet. If nothing else happens, they will soon realize something is wrong, then push open the door to the dungeon, and find Finney who has escaped and the people who were saved by Finney. Finney carefully opened the dungeon door to a gap just wide enough for the wand to pass through, and stretched out the wand he bought from the system. It was still the wand transformation technique, but this time, Finney turned the wand into an eye. He placed the end of the wand in front of his eyes and determined the number and position of the vampires outside the door. At this time, there were only 2 vampires outside the door. One of them had a wand in his hand. Although the other did not have a wand in his hand, from the analysis of his previous words, Finney suspected that he was also a high-level vampire who could cast spells. There was obviously no way to subdue 2 vampires with the ability to cast spells without making a little noise. At least the magic spell that Finney has mastered at this time cannot do this. If Finney had been exposed to the unforgivable curse before, this problem would be easily solved. Just use the Imperious Curse to control one of the vampires and let him attack the other. But Finney does not know the Imperious Curse. There are obviously no books teaching the unforgivable curses in the library of Hogwarts, so these 3 curses cannot be drawn with the pass. And Finney has no other way to learn this magic spell, so naturally he just doesn't know how to do it. However, this does not mean that Finney cannot learn it. The reason why unforgivable curses are called unforgivable curses is that on the one hand they are powerful and have no counter spells. They will take effect immediately after being hit. On the other hand, they are also called unforgivable curses. Because they are very simple, as long as they have enough magic power, they can be used skillfully after simple practice. This is the main reason why they are banned. This is like a weapon of mass destruction that can be widely controlled by civilians and must be banned and strictly controlled. Finney, who couldn't think of a good way, just closed the dungeon door gently again and retreated. It is true that he does not know the Imperious Curse, but it is very likely that some of the people he brought out will know this curse. Including the Death Curse, Finney would also like to learn it if possible. After all, fighting with the Death Curse is much better than using other combat magic. When he retreated into the dungeon corridors and tunnels, Finney found that the women he had rescued everyone, but it was a pity that there were only a few wizards here. Which of you knows the unforgivable curse? Finney looked at everyone and asked. The woman with the wand in her hand said hesitantly. I can, but if you use the unforgivable curse, you will be imprisoned in Azkaban. Finney nodded. I know, but in this situation, the unforgivable curse is the best curse to use. His tone was very firm, leaving no room for doubt. As the head of the Black family, although he had lived in seclusion in Grimmauld Place for most of these years, he had also come into contact with the people in charge of the family industry, and he had already developed his own power. In Hogwarts, powerful wizards like professors suppressed them and could not be released. Now, relying on the suppression of the elders, I was alone, facing the kidnapping of vampires. In anger, I unconsciously gave up my majesty. Revealed. Facing Feeny, who was unquestionably strong at this time, the woman opened her mouth, but couldn't say any words of rejection and could only nod. Feeny pointed to the cell behind everyone and said, "There are 2 low-level vampires who were knocked unconscious by me. You can use them as a demonstration to teach me these 3 unforgivable curses." The woman nodded helplessly and walked towards the 2 unconscious vampires. After all, she was an Auror. Teaching an underage wizard to use the unforgivable curse was a kind of torture for her, even if the young wizard was obviously better than I am much stronger. The unforgivable curse is divided into 3 types. The killing curse is also the death curse, the cruciatus curse and the soul-tampering curse. They are all extremely evil and cruel black magic. As I just said, once they are used on people, they will facing life imprisonment in Azkaban. As she spoke, the woman pointed her wand at a sleeping vampire. "Wake up quickly." The vampire woke up at the sound, opened his eyes and saw that everyone had escaped from custody, and was about to speak. However, the woman will naturally not give him this opportunity to expose everyone. With a wand. The soul is out of body. The vampire was directly controlled by the woman's Imperious Curse, and the woman explained at the same time. The Imperious Curse is an out-of-body spell that does not require specific wand gestures. It is a very evil black magic. When used on a person, it will cause the other person to lose their mind and do things exactly as the caster intended. Once this magic is successfully used, if used, one cannot recover. However, it should also be noted that this curse can be broken away and resisted. As long as you have enough resistance to this curse and have enough willpower, you can break free. When casting a spell, you need to be determined in your heart, and you need to constantly think about controlling the other person. After successful use, you will have a tingling feeling in your arm connected to the wand. After saying that, the woman turned her wand and pointed at the sleeping vampire beside her. The wand waved a bolt of lightning in the air. Avada Kedavra. A green light emitted from the tip of the wand, hitting the vampire, and the vampire lost its life in response. The killing curse, the spell is Avada Kedavra, and the gesture is a bolt of lightning from top to bottom. This is also the most cruel spell among the unforgivable curses. It has the property of instant death. If it is hit, you will definitely die. This demon, there is only one exception to this curse so far, and he has survived this curse. It's our well-known savior, Harry Potter. However, I don't know how he did it. So, if you encounter this curse, you must find a way to avoid it, otherwise, even if you just rub it a little, edge will kill you immediately. There is no way to cast this spell silently. To use it requires very firm belief, full of murderous intent, and the sound must be loud. The woman said this, sighed, and ordered the other vampire she controlled to stand in front of her, with her wand jumping up and pointing directly at the vampire. Heartbreaking and bone-cutting. A white light emits from the wand and connects to the vampire. The vampire was immediately freed from the Imperious Curse, his limbs curled up, and he fell to the ground. At the same time, his body twitched violently, shaking from side to side, and his mouth opened wide, about to let out a violent scream. "Shut up and say nothing." Feeny directly used a spell on the vampire to seal his mouth, so that the vampire could not scream due to pain and could only make muffled moans of pain. The female Auror sighed and continued. "The spell is to cut out the bones. Point the wand at the person who wants to cast the spell. This spell also requires firm belief. You must have a strong desire to make the other person miserable. Imagine that all the torture you can think of is released on the other person. Only by chanting the spell in this way can it be cast smoothly, otherwise, even if it is released, it will only make the opponent stumble. Finally, what I need to tell you is that the unforgivable curse is indeed not difficult to learn, but if you want it to be effective, you need a strong magic reserve. Otherwise, even if it is a killing curse, the effect may only make the enemy drain a little. Just a nosebleed." Feeny nodded, waved the wand in his hand, and shouted a spell at the painful vampire. Avada Kedavra. A green light appeared and the vampire's life evaporated. The female Auror was stunned when she saw this scene. She didn't expect that Feeny would learn so quickly and actually have enough magic to display it. The unforgivable curse is indeed as evil and cruel as the rumors say. Finney only used the killing curse once, and he felt the dark emotions in his heart continue to amplify, giving him the urge to kill everyone here. Finney knew that if it was not necessary, it would be better not to use these 3 unforgivable curses. Moreover, he felt that these 3 curses were more of a curse than a curse. Only a dark curse could have such a great impact on people's hearts. Finney glanced at the people who had just come out and said, "Everyone, get ready. We are going out. Wizards, if you can cast spells without a wand, try to cast spells without a wand. The main purpose is to seize the wand. Everyone, fight and retreat. A wizard without a wand is not even as good as an ordinary person. For many years, wizards have been accustomed to using wands to fight and do certain things, while muggles, on the other hand, mostly use firearms or fight with bare hands. Facing low-level vampires with better physiques and high-level vampires with wands, Finney knew very well that most of them couldn't escape. What he had to do was to use the escape and death of these people to let himself escape. Just as he planned, he stretched the wand out from the crack of the door, controlled one vampire with the Imperious Curse, and let the vampire kill another. Quickly clearing the guards at the dungeon door, the door was opened, and everyone completed the first step of escaping. At the same time, a message popped up in the system, but at this time, Finney had no time to check the system message. 2 of the escaped wizards, 2 dark wizards, picked up the 2 wands on the ground, and the escape team's combat power increased to another level. Everyone took their wands and fled outside. If they encountered other vampires on the way, the wizards would take action to deal with them. It went smoothly at first, until a vampire discovered everyone and shouted for help. Everyone encountered more obstacles and casualties gradually appeared. At this time in Hogwarts. "Professor, do we want to know about Black?" The Weasley brothers once again came to Professor McGonagall's office to ask for answers. Since Finney was kidnapped after the 2 fainted, they began to ask the professors about his whereabouts. The 2 of them stopped playing pranks and were not in the mood to go into the Forbidden Forest or go on night walks. In their view, Finney was taken away to protect them. Not only did they think so, many students in Hogwarts also saw it this way. Finney's situation has not changed despite his efforts for a semester, because things have improved with the Weasley brothers. At least Hufflepuff, who was originally neutral, had a better impression of Finney because of his loyalty to his friends. And because of this incident in Gryffindor, many young wizards' views on Finney have also improved, and they no longer think that he is a traitor like his brother. The Weasleys, who have no opinion of Finney themselves, are now helping the professors at Hogwarts to find Finney's whereabouts. The current head of the Black family was kidnapped from Hogwarts, which caused great harm to the Ministry of Magic. Many wizards began to think that the Ministry of Magic was unreliable and Hogwarts was not as safe as before. Although the people of the Pureblood family hoped that Finney would die so that they could have an excuse to annex the Black family's property, Finney was missing at this time. If they took action, they would have a reputation of adding insult to injury. Although many pureblood families have a bad reputation, they also cherish their feathers. They had no bad deeds in the past, and naturally did not want any bad deeds at this time. Finney's disappearance caused turmoil in the entire magic world for a while. Whether Hogwarts was still safe became the hottest topic, and the Ministry of Magic also wanted to take this opportunity to intervene in Hogwarts. At this time, Professor McGonagall was also helpless about the issue of the Weasley twins. "I'm sorry, Mr. Weasley, I have to tell you that we don't have any clues about Mr. Black. However, I can tell you that we have been looking for this matter, and you should go back to the dormitory and go to bed now." "But Professor," George said.